Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was in Hunter x Hunter, in which Konoha's beloved Jinchuriki finds herself in an odd new world with only Kurama by her side. He insists Biju bombs are the only way to fix this issue. Welcome aboard! Chapter 18, Wolf Spider 2. The thieves had chosen to land in some canyon. Miwa had hopped off when they began to descend, and she currently hid by the deflated balloon. The rest of the group had hopped down one level and waited for the chasing mafia members to find them. 100 or so men and women in tuxedos had gathered at the bottom of the canyon, and the group of thieves looked down on them. Miwa couldn't see their faces, but she could hear them. "There's a whole crowd," laughed the boy with blonde hair. "I don't have to clean this up, do I?" Shizuku asked. "No, they don't matter," answered Phaeton. "Oi, stay out of this," growled the burly man. "I'll handle it." The man slid down to the bottom of the canyon. Miwa couldn't hear anything at the bottom since she was too far away and the wind was very strong at the top of the canyon. She laid flat on her belly, looking down the ledge. "Popcorn would be nice," Kurama commented, and Miwa agreed. What happened next could only be described as a one-sided massacre as the burly man used his bare hands to snap necks and rip the mafia members apart limb from limb. His philosophy is to be stronger than anyone. "A mere bullet wouldn't faze him," mused the samurai. "Physically, he's the strongest," agreed the blonde boy. The largest man with the gun fingers muttered, "It's like watching a gorilla stomping ants." Oh, the samurai gestured off in the distance where more cars had arrived. "They just keep coming. They came all the way here just to die," laughed the big man. "Just watching isn't any fun," the blonde boy said. "Wanna play cards?" "Sure," the pretty pink-haired lady said. Miwa thought her hair looked really soft and she wondered what it would feel like to touch it. They all sat down and started to doll out the cards. Their game of cards was way more interesting than the slaughter below. Why? Because they kept trying out cheat each other. Miwa was admittedly very impressed with their underhanded skills. She wasn't very good at bullshit, the game they were currently playing, but she thought it looked like great fun. "I wish I could play," she thought. She decided to ask if Gon and Killua would play with her when she got back. She learned their names as they played. The burly man fighting with Yuvo. The blonde boy with a cheerful voice and cruel eyes was named Shelnark. The pretty pink-haired lady was named Maki. Samurai man was Nobunaga. Man with gun fingers was named Franklin. Miwa did her best to commit their names to her memory. Suddenly there was a vibration in her back pocket. It startled Miwa and she pulled out her Totoro 93 phone. It took her a minute to remember how to get to the messages and another minute to work through what it said. From Killua. Message, "Where are you? I guess I should probably head back." "It is kind of late," Miwa thought as she squinted at the time on the phone. "Got their scents memorized?" "Yep. Then you can track them down later if you're bored enough." Miwa agreed, then teleported back to the hotel room. "Where have you been?" Killua asked when Miwa appeared on their shared bed. Miwa started, but then stopped, wondering where she should even begin to describe the crazy events she had witnessed. She fished around in her messenger bag for a moment before pulling out the scroll she used to steal all the items. Gon hopped out of his bed, frowning curiously at the scroll she was holding up. "What's that, Miwa?" "All the items that were supposed to be auctioned off tonight," she said, eliciting surprised looks from her friends. The surprise didn't last long, though. Gon was immediately rushing toward her, eyes sparkling with bright curiosity and admiration. "Whoa! You stole everything? So quick? Did you get caught? What happened? Tell me, are you an idiot? You just made yourself the #1 target of the entire mafia." Killua scolded, his tone conveying anger and concern. "Yeah, no, someone else is taking the credit for it," she started to say. "Or at least they blame someone else." You guys have to listen to this." Gon and Killua exchanged glances. "And the guy had a spider tattoo on his back?" Killua asked to clarify when Miwa was done explaining. "Aha! That would be the Phantom Troop then," Killua told her, then grinned. "Of course the mafia will think they did it. Who are they more likely to believe stole all their stuff? A well-known group of thieves, or one girl?" "Sounds like you had a lot of fun," Gon said, tossing the storage scroll up and down. "Did you find the game?" "I don't think so," said Miwa with a headshake. To be honest, I don't know what to do with any of the stuff I got. My mom has some connections. She could probably pawn it off, Killua mentioned. Then I guess I'll send it over to her. Well, first I need to steal everything, Niwa corrected. 10 days of auctions, so there's still 9 more attempts to get the game. Unless I can find out where they're stashing everything, Gon grinned at her. Or unless we come up with enough money to properly buy it. Yeah, Niwa deadpanned, not believing for a second they would. Good luck with that. Niwa stretched out her arms and yawned. Gon smiled at her. You must be tired. Why don't we go to bed? Okay. Niwa said, rubbing at her eyes before starting to change into her pajamas. Stop changing in front of us, Killua hissed as he quickly grabbed Gon and fled to the bathroom so she could finish changing. Niwa always thought that was silly, but whatever. She changed into her cute pink night dress she bought back in Heaven's Arena, then hopped into the only bed. Only a single room was available due to the auctions going on, so the 3 of them were going to share. Not that any of them minded. It was well known that Niwa was a comfortable heater who liked the cuddles. Gon liked to cuddle too. Killua had been pretty stiff at first, but he was starting to get comfortable with Niwa curling into him. Done changing, Niwa politely told the boys who came back in. Killua hopped into bed with her, and Gon flopped on the other side. Nighty-night, Gon said, as he reached over and turned off the lamp. Sweet dreams, Killua said, pulling the covers up over them. I get to sleep in a cute dress between 2 cuties, Niwa thought, very happy. She wished they were fluffy like Kurama, but oh well. This has been a fun day. Kurama did not purr in a traditional sense, but he let out a rumble of amusement very similar that lulled Niwa into such sweet dreams. In the morning, Niwa woke up second. Killua had always been the first to wake up, so he was already out of bed. Gon was snoring, clinging onto her like a pillow, and she carefully removed herself to not wake him. Niwa hopped onto the couch at the end of the bed where Killua was flipping through a big book. What's that? Niwa whispered as to not wake Gon. The auction catalog. If you're going to steal the game, might as well try to figure out which auction it's going to take place at. Niwa blinked. Wouldn't it be at the same place? All auctions in the city are run by the 10 worldwide mafia groups, Killua began to quietly explain, but each is broken into different sections. Not all the auctions are underground like the one you stole from last night. It looks like the one that is selling Greed Island is a public one. Oh, Niwa said. When is it going up? Later in the week. You should hold off on stealing anything else from this auction, Killua said, holding up the book so Niwa could see the title. It says Southern Bees. Memorize this word so you don't steal from it. If they're too flighty, we might lose our chance to grab the game at all. Southern Bees, Niwa repeated, focusing on the word. Southern Bees. Okay. Avoid stealing from Southern Bees. Killua gave her a smile. Good. How's your reading coming along? Better-ish. Do you want to practice more Fuinjutsu? Sure. Killua and Niwa practiced Fuinjutsu for another hour before Gon woke up and the 3 enjoyed breakfast. Killua and Gon told Niwa how that mafia sent out a bounty hunt last night for the Phantom Troop members, believing them to be the culprits. Niwa giggled at that, proud of herself. Killua flicked her nose and warned her not to get a big head. Once they finished breakfast, Killua and Gon headed back out to fairly earn money, while Niwa went to learn more about that Southern Bees auction. If she was lucky, she could find out where the games were being hidden and grab them all. A part of her did wonder if maybe she should try to find those thieves again. She wanted to see the look on their faces when she told them she stole everything. She especially wanted to see the look on Phaeton's face, as she felt like he would be extra mad at her. That would be funny. She always thought it was amusing when Killua got flustered and angry at her when she started stripping. Now the thieves have a bounty on them. I wonder how mad they are. Niwa thought, giggling again to herself. They'll definitely be trying to find you, said Kurama. That's fine. I want to meet them again one day. Niwa wandered about the city, asking questions to some strangers about the Southern Bees auction. Not many had good information on it, only the basics like where it was being held and when. If I could find a person that worked there, I could track them, Niwa thought to herself, wondering how exactly she was supposed to do that in a giant city that used a language she could barely read. She even felt too embarrassed by her lack of skill in reading that she couldn't muster up the courage to order lunch by herself. She had become too reliant on Gon and Killua doing that for her. Then she came across a dessert shop with a long line that made her mouth water. She hesitantly approached the lady up front, who told her that there was a waiting list and that she could put Miwa on it. "They'll call you when a table is ready for you," the nice lady told Miwa. "What's your number?" After Miwa gave her the number, she quickly pulled her phone out to see if Gon and Killua would eat with her. She felt uncomfortable at the idea of sitting alone in that fancy dessert shop, struggling to read a single item on the menu. 2. Killua and Gon. Formed group message with Gon and Killua. Message: Miwa, can you eat me? Message: Gon, what haha? Message: Killua, do you want us to eat with you? Message: Miwa, yes. Message: Gon, that sounds way more boring. Message: Killua, what time? Message: Miwa, 3. Message: Killua, come get us at 2:30. Message: Miwa, hankers. Message: Gon, Welsers. Message: Killua, asterisk thank you and asterisk you're welcome. Stop encouraging bad habits, Gon. Message: Gon, eat me. Message: Miwa, eat me. Killua has left the group chat. Miwa could easily picture Killua's look of frustration, and it made her giggle. Killua was extra adorable when his cheeks turned red. She was happy and relieved her friends would eat with her. All she had to do now was kill a couple of hours of time waiting to teleport to them at 2:30. Meanwhile, with Killua and Gon, Killua, Gon, and Leo Rio had hurried over to a cafe on the far side of the city. They had information that someone spotted members of the Phantom Troop and went to ascertain. The three of them took seats at an indoor cafe that overlooked the outdoor cafeteria below. They could spot the two Phantom Troop members at once, a woman with long pink hair and a man with long black hair. Killua only needed to look at them once to understand it would be difficult, maybe impossible, without Miwa. Killua had been raised and trained to immediately ascertain the power levels of those around him. He was exceptionally good at it, and it was one of the traits he was proud of himself for having. The troop members at that table were strong. Miwa was absurdly stronger, but they were still strong enough that Killua didn't have confidence in handling them alone. Leo Rio held up a finger at the table. "We should decide our next move." "How do we catch those two?" "That's impossible," said Killua. "They're out of our league." "What the hell?" "We won't know until we try," Leo Rio said angrily. "And why are you saying this now?" "Quit fussing, they'll notice us," Killua sharply warned before softening his tone back to normal. "But it's still true. I knew it as soon as I saw them. My dad killed one of the spiders for a job before. It was one of the few times I've ever heard him complain. He said it wasn't worth the money, that's the highest compliment he can give to a target. And he told us to stay away from the troop. It had been a few years since he told me, so I thought we might stand a chance." Leo Rio tentatively asked, "They're really that strong?" "It might help if you pretend there were two Hisokas sitting there." Gon and Leo Rio cringed at that image. "That'd be bad," Gon conceded. "So, what do you think they're here for? A date?" Leo Rio guessed. Gon gasped. "Really? No. They're paying close attention to their surroundings." "At first, I thought it was just caution because the mafia is after them, but in that case, they wouldn't be sitting in a public place." "They aren't worried at all. They're waiting for someone to find them, acting as bait to draw out their prey. So, what do we do?" Killua carefully considered their options. "Back with Miwa." Miwa was excited. As soon as it hit 2:30, she teleported straight to the Hiraishin on the back of Gon. To her utter surprise, she had teleported into a dilapidated warehouse filled to the brim with Phantom Troop members. In only a handful of seconds, Miwa processed the fact that every member she had seen last night, in addition to new members, were present. She also noticed that Hisoka was there, which grossed her out, but she considered him less than cockroach, so it was easy to ignore him after the initial thoughts of EW. Gon was sitting across the samurai man, Nobunaga, and looked to be in the middle of an arm wrestling match. Killua was standing in front of Franklin and in between Phaeton and Maki. Gon let out an "oh" of surprise when he saw her, and every Phantom Troop member reacted tensely upon her arrival. Miwa couldn't believe it. They were better than she thought. Eh? You kidnapped my friends just 'cause I stole the loot first? Miwa blurted out in surprise, her eyes widening. How did you even figure out it was me that stole it all? You! Phaeton pointed at Miwa, his tone cold and furious. Ah, the large man named Franklin said, putting the pieces together. You didn't die. That was a clone, Miwa said, looking down at her friends and frowning. Guys, I'm sorry you got kidnapped because of me. Gon said. It wasn't because of you. They had no idea who you were until you told them, sighed Killua. The cute one remembers me, Miwa said, tilting her head. Cute? Killua was aghast, his eyes narrowed as his cheeks flushed. It was distracting how much he reminded her of a sulking Kurama, which made Miwa want to nuzzle him. Which one are you calling cute? Miwa pointed to Phaeton. Him. He's cute. He did a very impressive kill. You can't marry him, you're engaged to Killua, so you'll teach us both the Rasengan and Hiraishin, Gon immediately protested. Miwa squawked. Stop telling everyone we're engaged. Are we killing them now? Phaeton asked, glaring murderously at Miwa. She thought that his killing intent was rather nice. Reminded her of Kurama's default malicious chakra. She smiled brightly at Phaeton, giving him a wave like Gon had taught her to do when trying to make friends. Gon told her that it was important to be very friendly, and everyone knew waves were friendly. And thumbs up. Miwa gave Phaeton a thumbs up. Hold on, the pretty pink lady named Maki cut in sharply. You were there at the auction house? Yeah, I saw what you guys did. Watched everything, Miwa admitted. Nobunaga had let go of Gon's hand, and the boy had jumped up to stand beside Miwa, a huge smile on his face. That's impossible, Nobunaga said suspiciously. No one sensed you. That big guy, I think you called him Yuvo, he smelled me. I had to work a little harder to stay hidden. But I hung upside down on your hot air balloon. That Yuvo fella talked on the phone with someone for a while, and Phaeton said someone had a very unlucky day. Miwa trailed off for a moment before she recounted what she had seen that night. It took several minutes, as she stumbled over their names a few times, and she cheated in the card game by swapping cards when everyone else looked over at the fight, Miwa finished, nodding to Maki. I knew it. Nobunaga shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at her. You knew nothing, Maki dismissed. Phaeton stepped forward, his cold harder than steel as he asked, Did you see the chain user? Chain user? Miwa repeated. I left after that leech dude bit Yuvo. The spiders seemed to silently exchange glances. It's clear she was there that night, Franklin began. Seems likely she took the loot. Very impressive, a blond man Miwa didn't recognize observed. He stood further back from the other troops and had what some might describe a gangster face. Miwa scratched her cheek. Thanks. So, you didn't kidnap my friends? We got caught tailing them, Gon chirped. Miwa flicked him on the forehead, making him cry out and clutch at the spot she flicked him. Ow. What was that for? Miwa scolded him, why'd you go and do something like that? I told you I'd steal the stuff for you, neither of you should be trying to do something dangerous. Killua, you're the smart one, why didn't you stop Gon? Killua looked away, clicking his tongue in his annoyance, tch. Nobunaga was looking Miwa up and down then grinned. Hey kid, wanna join the Phantom Troop? Eh? Miwa couldn't help but blush in pleasant surprise. She had to admit joining a prestigious group of thieves sounded so cool. She had a lot of fun stealing stuff and she knew she would continue to do so until the day she died. It was delightful to outwit and outmaneuver idiots. That sounds so cool, Miwa admitted in a gush, placing a hand over her cheek as she seriously considered their offer. But I don't know. No. Killua quickly rejected. The answer is no. We don't need a child in the troop, Phaeton hissed. She's clearly a good thief, Maki pointed out. The boss should get a chance to meet her. Miwa was about to respond to that but her phone went off. Oh, sorry, one moment. She hit the answer button, but accidentally put it on speaker. Your table's ready at Lovely Sparkles and Sunshine, chimed the nice waitress from before. That's where you want to eat? Killua asked, his expression tired. Eat me, Gon whispered, eliciting a glare from Killua. Thanks, we'll be there shortly, Miwa told the waitress, giving the phone to Gon so he could hang up for her. Sorry, Phantom Troop, but food is calling. You're supposed to be good thieves, right? So just kidnap me later. I don't think Nobunaga was abruptly cut off when Miwa used her superior speed to grab Killua and bring him back over to Gon. Oh, wow, none of you reacted, Miwa observed. Guess you're kind of slow. Oh, went Gon. You're more likely to be slowed down by them if you joined, Killua told Miwa. Ignore them. Oh, went Gon again. Miwa looked back over at the group. Well, bye for now. She then teleported the three of them to the dessert shop where they enjoyed a lovely meal. Now here is an alternate scenario. One where Miwa is against the Phantom Troop because she comes at a different time. Specifically, after the arm wrestling match had gone on long enough to seriously hurt Gon. It's all about how she meets them, and how nice they are to her friends. Miwa used her ration to teleport directly to Gon. Imagine her surprise when she teleported inside a ruined, abandoned building, filled with Jounin-level Nin/Chakra users. She only had a couple of seconds to assess her surroundings, and in that time frame she realized that Gon and Killua were with the members of the Phantom Troop that she had tailed last night, along with a few additional members. What the fuck are they doing here? Kurama questioned, and Miwa could perfectly picture his exasperated face. Who's that? Asked Shelnark, the cute blonde boy blinking his green eyes in surprise upon Miwa's arrival. Am Miwa! Gon exclaimed, surprised, his eyes widening. What are you doing here? Came to pick you guys up, Miwa said, her nose twitching as she caught the scent of. Her eyes trailed down to. Gon? Miwa inquired, her voice now quiet and cold as she stared at the blood dripping down Gon's hand. The injury was not something quick or gained in a one-off fight, but judging by the bruising formation, someone had slammed his hand repeatedly into something hard. The leftover stench of fear and anxiety still clung onto Gon and Killua's clothes, and they screamed something awful to Miwa. These adults had attacked, possibly tortured, her friends. These adults, who had mercilessly slaughtered hundreds only just last night, were likely about to do the same to her friends. Man? Who did that to your hand? She asked, bubbles of rage popping inside her, warming her to an uncomfortable level. Gon did not say anything, but his eyes flickered over to a man dressed like a samurai who leaned against a broken-off piece of concrete. Time to play? Kurama asked. Time to play, Miwa agreed, and she moved. There was no time for any human to react, not unless they had decades of experience in dealing with the Shushin, or faster. These Phantom Troop members were undoubtedly a cut above regular humans, but they were still human. They were limited to a single ability, and had no further experience in constantly pouring energy through their limbs. The samurai Miwa moved to attack was certainly strong and fast. He reacted well enough to raise his right hand in defense, and even fuel such a movement with his nun. But this man did not have an equal power to match the force behind Miwa's attack. She dug her heel hard into his hand, sending it careening back into the concrete block, shattering bone and concrete. Within the second afterward, she dug her fist hard into his face, breaking his nose. She was mindful not to shove his nose up and kill him immediately. It was not out of some kind-hearted mercy to make this choice, but out of her pure rage of wanting to prolong his suffering. She would have destroyed his joints next, but that particularly sadistic fellow, Phaeton, was already on her. He was faster than the samurai, and his aura was hot. Hot like Kurama's base chakra. It was actually rather nostalgic feeling that heat near her. It reminded Miwa of vague angry flashes of Kurama's chakra burning her skin off to mix in with a cloak of blood and chakra. The complete release of his seal, coupled with sage training, guaranteed Kurama's chakra would never harm Miwa again, so it had been a long time since she felt that heat. She grabbed his hand that had been aiming for her neck, pulling Kurama's chakra with her own and burning his wrist straight down to the bone where she snapped it in half. In her free hand Chidori sparked to life, the lightning sparks chirping a bittersweet song, and she dug it straight into his gut. He was able to land a solid punch atop Miwa's head while she did so, but his strength rapidly drained as she ripped his organs out and kicked him off her. She carelessly tossed the severed hand away, bloodlust and sadistic fury making her blue eyes glisten with malice. Kurama laughed with glee in her head as the next target tried to stop her. It was a new person, and judging by the strength of his punch that Miwa had to catch, he was an enhancer type. She burned Kurama's chakra into his fist and summoned the Rasengan with her other hand. He made a move to catch her, to stop her hand, but the Rasengan tore straight through his other hand, through his aura and flesh, before digging into his abdomen and sending him flying backwards. His intestines spewed out of him like a rogue cotton candy machine. She moved to the next one, and this one was the black-haired girl named Shizuku. Miwa moved to slam her Rasengan straight into Shizuku's chest, but then her phone started ringing and the sound startled Miwa enough that she leapt back to Gon and Killua's side. She pulled out her phone, casually answering it. "Hello?" The remaining troop members rushed to take defensive positions, while that pink-haired girl hurried over to Phaeton's side. "Ah," Miwa said, listening to the other end. "Okay, we'll be there in a minute." She brightened considerably, smiling sweetly at her friends. "The reservations for the dessert shop are ready," she chirped. "Ready to go?" "Yum," Gon said cheerfully, nodding happily. "Good. Let me just take of one more thing," she said, smiling sweetly. "Want to see the raisin haro?" Their grins said it all. What a beautiful slaughter. Chapter 19, Wolf Spider 3. After a wonderful dessert-filled dinner, the three children headed back to the hotel to talk about their next plan of action. "I want to kick their butts," said Gon as he patted his full stomach. "They were really strong. To be honest, I'm not sure if we could have made it out without you, Miwa." Killua yawned, stretching his arms up. "It would have been hard, but maybe doable. If you want to kick their butts, you'll have to practice your nin and chakra more," Miwa said. "We should go find Kurapika then," said Killua. "Huh?" Gon looked over in surprise. "How come?" "I was thinking about it over dinner. I'm pretty sure Kurapika is the chain user that killed their friend." "Kill who?" "Oh," said Gon before turning to Miwa and filling her in on the details of what happened. Miwa was indignant that they threatened her friends, but Gon and Killua were dismissive over the whole thing. It was basically another Heaven's Arena situation. Gon and Killua had to face stronger opponents to become stronger themselves. It nettled Miwa, but her seeing how unbothered her friends were, she felt reassured. "If they really hurt you, I'll kill them," Miwa sternly impressed. "No amount of cuteness will prevent me from protecting you too." "Ah," Gon said, nudging Miwa. "You like us, you really like us." Miwa's cheeks reddened as she grinned. "Yep. A whole lot. More than that, Phaeton, right?" Killua muttered. Miwa giggled at Killua's question. "What a silly. Oh, is someone jealous?" Gon laughed. "Shut up," replied Killua, glaring at Gon. "Eat me," retorted a snickering Gon. "Stop. Eat me," giggled Miwa. Killua groaned in frustration. "Why am I friends with you too?" "Eat us," they said. Miwa offered to send the text to Kurapika. Killua said he had to proofread it for her before she sent it, which she thought stunk, because she wanted to send Eat Me to him first. She refrained. To Kurapika. Message: tell us when you are free. We, Gon, Killua, Miwa, need to talk to you about Nen and the spiders. Also, I did it. Smiley face. Ah, Gon said after the message was sent. I got something for you, Miwa. I left it at the hotel room. Miwa blinked in surprise. What do you mean? We were at the market hunting for treasures to sell, and I saw it and I knew it would be perfect for you, he said with a warm twinkle in his eyes. They headed back over to the hotel where Gon proudly held out a porcelain fox mask that would cover the upper half of Miwa's face. Ta-da! Perfect for a thief. Elated, she accepted the mask. She ran her fingers over it, feeling how sturdy and smooth it was. She slipped it on. Not a perfect fit, but close enough. You remembered I like foxes? She asked in surprise. Yep. Gon gave her 2 thumbs up. Miwa hurried into the bathroom to admire herself in the mirror. If only I was fluffy. An idea occurred to her. She used to henge over herself to give her fox ears and a bushy golden tail. I'm a fox. Looky, looky. Congratulations on improving yourself, Kit. Bubbles of joy made Miwa smile so brightly the other boys found her happiness infectious. I've got to go back out and steal again tonight, she said. I want to properly use this mask. You'll need different clothes than your regular ones, then. Let's go shopping real quick, Killua suggested. Brief interlude. Krallo Lucifer, leader of the Phantom Troop, reread his fortune. Shelnark had been quick to ascertain that the chain user that murdered Yuvajin was from the Nostrade family. The family had risen to high ranks in the underworld due to the head's daughter, a blue-haired young lady named Neon. Neon had a particularly wonderful nin ability that granted her the powers of completely accurate fortunes. She had many important clients in the underworld that granted her family special privilege. Krallo had watched the girl for a day, looking for an opportunity to meet her and ideally steal her ninability. Luck was in his favor, as the girl was anxious to get away from her bodyguards. She had shown him her fortune-telling ability as thanks. When he had read the first verse of the poem, he knew it was perfectly accurate. It had predicted Euvagin's death. The rest of the poem was easy enough to decipher. It was only the last bit that Krallo would need more information on before drawing a conclusion. It was easy to swiftly knock Neon out and slip away in the confusion. Krallo knew the Mafia would be on his tail shortly. Even if they had not successfully stolen from them the previous night, the Mafia would still blame the troop, and Krallo had every intention of making tonight's raid a success. Well, Krallo intended for the night to hold more than simply stealing from the Mafia. Euvagin had been taken them. In honor of his companion, Krallo would grant a night of chaos upon the city, one filled with death, mayhem, and gore, that would surely make Euvagin's soul sing in joy where it may be. Krallo pulled out the notebook with his fortune written on it, reading it over one more time. The calendar loses a precious component. The remaining months gather to mourn. The mourners play a melody, while the 11th moon quietly rises. The chrysanthemum withers and falls to lie on the ground beside bloody scarlet eyes. But you will remain supreme, after losing half your limbs. Join hands with the golden fox, lead it to the city that fell from the sky. It will show you a lifelong Sunday. Krallo tucked the fortune away in his suit pocket. He did not know yet who or what the fox was, but had a feeling he'd know soon enough. For now, Krallo thought, let's play a melody for Euvagin. Back with Miwa. Miwa admired her new thief outfit in the shop's mirror, turning left to right to look at it. She anxiously looked back at her friends, a shy smile on her face. Does it look good? Gone, cheerful always, offered her 2 thumbs up. You look cool, Miwa. MN. It's fine, Killua agreed, looking her over. I guess thieves are supposed to wear black, she said, oddly nervous. She had never put much stock into her appearance previously, but now that she was highly aware of how cute certain people and things were, she wanted to fit into her own category. She wanted to be cute. Dawn had picked out a black sleeveless zippered up vest with pockets and matching black leggings. Simple, but that was fine. Miwa didn't need battle armor, or many pockets to carry her scrolls. She frankly didn't need any kind of disguise, but dressing up was part of the fun of it. Miwa re-examined herself in the mirror. She wouldn't call herself a fashionable person, but she didn't think it looked bad. At least it wasn't ugly. She couldn't call it cute. She hinged her fox ears and tail. Okay, now it's cute, Miwa happily thought. Do you think it's cute, Kurama? Are we still using the previous definition of fur and heat as cute? Sure. Well, you've more fur now, so sure. Yay. I like it, Miwa boldly declared. I wanna get it. Okay, Killua said, pulling out his wallet from his back pocket. Let's go pay. All that's left would be gloves. Okie dokie. That night Miwa got dressed in her official thieving outfit and set back out to steal from the main underground auction. I hope I beat the Phantom Troop again. That'd be funny. As she hopped rooftop to rooftop, Miwa started to pick up the stench of blood and gunpowder. Her nose wrinkled, she hated how gunpowder smelled, and she quickened her pace. The closer she got, the more gunshots she could hear. Screams could be caught in the distance, and she got the sweet smell of burning flesh among the acrid smell of burning gasoline. Wow, Miwa thought, hopping over a rooftop to see a slew of bodies leading up to the building where the auction was being held. She inhaled deeply, concentrating as she tried to pick up any familiar scents. It's the Phantom Troop, they're slaughtering all the guards, Miwa thought, in admiration. Would it be rude to join in? No, do it. Do it now. Miwa shrugged, then dropped from the top of a skyscraper on top of a group of what she assumed to be reinforcements for the Mafia. Being careful not to let a single drop of blood spill onto her outfit, she ripped out their hearts. She moved too quickly for the blood to be anywhere else but on her hand, which she removed her gloves from as not to stain them. She left their hearts on the grass, a skip in her step. Another group came toward her. She picked up their car and tossed it onto another car, which somehow made it explode. She skipped all the way to the auction house building, following the scents of some troop members. She snuck into the building, avoided the rest of the security, and then... Smells like Killua's home. Immediately curious, Miwa lost interest in the troupe and followed the scent up the building, where she found two men coming down the steps, both a little battered. Ah, Miwa said, sniffing them. Could it be? Are you two Zoldyck? The one on the left was an old man, shrunken and hunched over, but Miwa could sense his Nenkor was fierce and impressive. He had cold eyes that assessed her with indifference. The one on the right was tall, muscular, but whose eyes were not as apathetic. Blonde pigtails, the younger man muttered, looking closely at Miwa. Are you Miwa? Miwa smiled and politely curtsied like Killua showed her to do to impress rich people. Yes. Are you both related to Killua? I am his father, Silva, introduced the younger man. Who? You're the one Kikyo wants for Killua, the older man, she assumed Killua's grandfather, asked. Better scurry away, little girl. Okie dokie, Miwa said. It was nice meeting you both. They moved past her, and Miwa looked up at the top of the stairs where they had come from. She could smell a bit of blood in one of the rooms, and out of curiosity she went inside. It was a ballroom. It was mostly destroyed, with one of the walls completely collapsed and a giant crater in the middle of the floor. There was a man on the ground on the opposite side of the room, although upon her arrival he immediately sat up. The two stared at each other. He was a young man, Miwa observed, with dark hair and gray eyes. His core felt about the same size as Killua's father, but it was hard to get a distinct read on it. As if it were a mirror, merely reflecting the world around it instead of showing its own truth. I don't think he's someone I want to fight willy-nilly, Miwa thought, a little on edge. His core wasn't as strong as Netero, a man Miwa did not want to fight without good reason, but the fact that she couldn't identify him made him dangerous. She now understood that their abilities in this world could be literally anything due to how Odin formed. A man who had a core like mirrors. Potentially could reflect my damage, or maybe even steal abilities. He asked, his voice softer than a gentle breeze. Are you the golden fox? His tone threw Miwa for a loop. Netero was hard to get a read on, but the man before Miwa felt not nice. Nice was not the word she could use to describe him, but, like me, he feels like someone lost, Kurama commented, feeling the man's none. Kurama was best at judging people, so Miwa instantly trusted his words. The man before Miwa was lost. Lost in what, or how, she didn't understand. Maybe he didn't have home anymore like Miwa, or... A thought occurred to Miwa, so brief and alarming she instantly shredded it to pieces before it could finish forming. Miwa pointed to herself. Me? I am disguised as one at least. Do you like my fluffy tail? He looked at her tail and Miwa proudly presented it. Gon and Killua weren't nearly as fond of fluffy things like Miwa. She hoped to one day find someone else who enjoyed fluffy stuff. Maybe the lost man was looking for the fluffy things? It is a nice tail, he politely praised, slowly standing up and brushing off debris. What's your name? Miwa, answered Miwa without thinking. Oh, wait. Aren't thieves supposed to use fake names? I've never bothered, said the man. Oh. Are you a thief too? I prefer bandit. The man looked her up and down before extending a hand. It's nice to meet you, Miwa. Likewise, Miwa accepted the hand. What's your name? Before the man could answer, the door to the ballroom opened up and members of the Phantom Troupe came in. As soon as Miwa spotted Phaeton, her entire demeanor lit up like the sun pouring out behind storm clouds. She excitedly waved at him, unable to keep from bouncing on her toes. She was super relieved that Gon and Killua only wanted to kick his butt. She'd be a little sad if she had to attack such a cutie. It'd be like attacking a baby black cat. She'd do it if she had to in order to keep her friends safe, but it'd bum her out. Phaeton's face screwed up like he bit into a rotten lemon as he glared at her. Like you when we first met, Miwa happily thought. She didn't have specific memories, but she definitely remembered that Kurama insulted and glared at her every time she visited him before they became friends. I was nothing like that cretin. Ah, it's you again, said Maki as the rest of the troop members recognized her. Do you know her? The man from before asked. She's the one who stole everything from last night's auction, explained Maki. The man smiled in brief amusement. Here to steal again? Maybe, Miwa said, looking around at the gathering troop members. Hello again. So, this is the one Nabugana wanted to invite into the troop, the man mused. And do you want to be a spider, Miwa? Miwa shrugged. I don't know. Is it fun? That's a good question, said the man, looking up at the ceiling. Is it fun? Why don't you watch us tonight? Wow, being invited to watch sounds much better than quietly stalking. Thank you, I will. Miwa was silent as she saw them get to work. She hovered near the man who was clearly their leader. She wanted to catch his name, but they only referred to him as boss. She watched as they effortlessly infiltrated the staff of the auction and started it up. In the back of the main room where the auction took place, they would create duplicates of the items up for bid, then sell the fakes created while taking money for the real one. It was done with such ease that Miwa was admittedly very impressed by them. And then she spotted one of the items up for sale, a jar with scarlet red eyes. She stared at them, her memories blurring together between a black-haired boy with red eyes that burned with pain and hatred, and a Kurapika whose own eyes were haunted by a similar pain. Miwa said, drawing attention to herself. Would it be possible if I could take those eyes? How come? The boss asked, his tone always so soft that Miwa couldn't tell what he truly felt. It's just, these eyes, I can't quite remember, but I think I need to give them back to someone, Miwa tried to explain, her brow furrowed in thought. Back in the exam, they said that Kurapika's clan had been wiped out for their eyes. He'd probably want these back to put them to rest. Miwa's words stirred something in the boss and he asked, back to? Whom? I know one of the survivors, Miwa explained. I think he'd want to put them to rest. Miwa's words instantly caused all the troop members in the back of the auction room to slightly tense. If Miwa's eyes hadn't been so well trained, she likely would have missed the subtle reaction. This survivor, the boss said slowly, gently, do you happen to know if he uses chains? Chains? Miwa repeated the word carefully. I haven't seen him use it, but when I think about it his nen core feels like chains. Feels? Maki inquired. Ah. I can sense nen, Miwa explained. Like you feel like a ball of tight threads and needles. The phantom troop members exchanged glances. All of this was done while they carried on with the auction, picking out the items up for bid and making copies of them. Oh wait, Gon said you guys lost someone to an nen chain user, Miwa said, putting the pieces together. And Killua thought Kurapika might have been the one to do it, but we have no confirmation. Miwa thought about Kurapika. She wouldn't call him one of her friends, but he was a nice enough boy. She liked him. His nen felt colder than the first time she met him, but he was still kind enough to sit with her in a restaurant and teach her how to read the menu. Miwa couldn't say she was fond of humans. She didn't see them any different than the animals she hunted in the forest. Animals didn't like it when they died, but if they were in her way, she wasn't going to shed a tear about it. Humans could be cute like animals, but they could be annoying like them too. At the end of the day, Miwa's general opinion on life was closer to apathy. The only value it had was the value Miwa herself put it in. She liked Gon and Killua, therefore their lives were important to her. She liked Kurapika enough to not want him to die, but she liked the Phantom Troop equally. They were interesting and fun to watch work. It would be annoying if she had to choose between the two. She didn't care for them on the same level as Gon and Killua to make it an obvious choice, but she wasn't so disinterested that she wouldn't be upset if she had to choose. Kurapika wasn't dumb. Gon repeatedly told them Kurapika was the smartest person he knew. He surely wasn't so stupid to antagonize such a professional group of thieves without good reason. More than likely if Kurapika had killed Yuvajin it was done in self-defense. Miwa had seen Yuvo in action before, he struck her as a berserker type. If he had attacked Kurapika in a frenzy, it'd only make sense for Kurapika to defend himself. Surely, Miwa thought, such a professional and calm group of thieves won't be too but hurt over losing a member in self-defense. And if that boss is more like you than you thought? Would you let it go? No, Miwa answered, thinking about what she'd do if Gon and Killua had died from attacking someone. After she thought about it, she figured she'd be more concerned protecting whoever lived. If they had both died. A Biju bomb in the city of their death didn't seem too far-fetched as something Miwa would do. Hunt down any member or friend of the person who had done the deed. She could see herself doing that. Gon and Killua were her only connections to humans. If she lost that, what was the point? A depressing thought for another day. Returning to her original thoughts on Kurapika and the Phantom Troop, Miwa decided to cut straight to the point, Do you want me to ask him if he killed one of you? There was surprise on some of their faces, but the boss only tilted his head slightly and asked, would he tell you? I don't see why not, Miwa answered with a shrug. Gon and Killua were planning on meeting up with him earlier to learn more about Nun. Then, the boss paused. If you wouldn't mind, I'd be curious to know his response. Okay, Miwa agreed, pulling out her phone. Here, put your contact information in here and I'll text you. He accepted the phone, punching in his information before handing it back to Miwa. Krallo, Miwa read. His name was Krallo. Then can I give these eyes to him? Miwa asked. Sure. A gift from us, Krallo mused. Thanks. You guys are really nice. Then Miwa remembered the slaughter. Well, to me you've been nice, I can't really say the same for the ones killed. For some reason that made them laugh, and the blonde man who had a gangster face put a hand atop Miwa's head and said, You're a good kid. You should join us. Can I think about it for a couple of days? Miwa asked. It seems like a really important decision I shouldn't rush. Of course, responded Krallo. Are you having fun, then? Yeah. I like watching Phaeton work, too. Phaeton glared at her. Oh? Krallo probed. Because he's cute, Miwa explained as if it were the most obviously thing in the world. Isn't it fun to watch kittens and puppies play? Ah. Congratulations, Phaeton, someone thinks you're cute. Krallo, with a straight face, politely congratulated the furious Phaeton while members of the troop snickered. Chapter 20, Wolf Spider 4. Once they had finished stealing the items, Miwa watched them fake their deaths and then headed back to the hotel. She was excited to tell her friends about everything that had happened. To her delight, Kurapika was already in the hotel room. She was surprised he had stopped by so late. Kurapika's eyes bulged when Miwa walked in holding a jar of scarlet eyes. Wah, here you go, said Miwa, holding out the jar with a big smile. It's from the auction. But these were bought, stumbled Kurapika, accepting the eyes of his dead clanmate. The phantom troop. Kurapika fell silent as a hollowed expression washed over him. His eyes dulled, he clutched tightly at the jar. He looked closer to a corpse than a living human. What's wrong? Asked Miwa, tilting her head curiously. He's sad the phantom troop died, explained Gon from his seat on the bed. Oh, Miwa said, brightening. Then I've got great news for you. They aren't. They were at the auction. They made copies of everything there and sold the fakes while stealing the originals. They let me take the eyes though. Kurapika slowly raised his head to look at her, a myriad of emotions flickering over his face. Disbelief, joy, fury, bitterness, and everything in between. He eventually schooled his features to that closer of apathy, his nun cooling rapidly. The sharp decrease in temperature of his nun alarmed Miwa. Her heart jumped and for a moment. Sasuke? What's wrong? She asked again uneasily. Thank you. His words were that of gratitude, but his tone was detached and the chains in his nen rattled ominously. For what? What is the troop to you? It is my purpose to destroy the phantom troop. They are instruments of destruction and hunted down my clan for our eyes. They deserve death, Kurapika sternly said, the chill in his nen only worsening. Miwa's mind blanked for a moment until she asked in a quiet, trembling voice, This is for revenge? Kurapika nodded curtly, and at once Miwa was filled with a surge of pure frustration. Revenge. Revenge? Kurama started to play boss battle music in their shared mind. An instant overwhelming rage exploded inside Miwa's heart. That single word coming out of a boy whose red eyes gleamed of hurt and kindness triggered something inside the Jinchuriki. She couldn't resist the hot anger that burned her from the inside out as her emotions surged forth without consent and she unleashed them onto the boy before her. Are you stupid? She couldn't help but hiss out, her tone raised to a shrill pitch. Revenge? Revenge? Kurapika paled with anger at her remarks, but she stampeded on before he could say anything. Let me get this straight, Miwa said again, trying in vain to rein in her flood of fury. She glowered with seething disgust as she snapped at him, Your entire revenge is centered on trying to get back at the tools that destroyed your clan. Kurapika's eyes narrowed. The phantom troop are a symptom of the problem, Miwa hotly barked out. Answer me right now, would you rather A? Kill the phantom troop or B? Have your entire clan revived and restored? Of course, I'd rather they were alive. Kurapika snarled out. Then your revenge is fucking pointless, she growled back. Kill the troop and then what? Another group will take its place and another clan with different pretty eyes or pretty teeth or whatever will be murdered instead. Your revenge is entirely focused on a selfish desire to strike out mindlessly. If you would rather have your damn clan back, then shouldn't you be more focused on trying to prevent such tragedies from happening again? Shouldn't you be targeting the flesh market itself, skinning and slaughtering those who hired the phantom troop instead? Those who gave motivation, desire, need for your eyes? Instead, you put all your efforts into destroying the weapon used instead of the wielder. You moron! You absolute idiot! He fell silent, paled with rage, and quivering with absolute fury as he scowled at her. Gon said you were smart. Tell me, smart one, when you inevitably kill yourself trying to shatter a damn weapon, will you feel better? Will all your aches and pains go away? Or are you honestly trying to delude yourself into thinking that this was for them? For bags of meat that have already rotted away. Tell me, smart one, if you were to ask them, would they wish for the phantom troop's death, or would they wish for the flesh market to be abolished? Kurapika's eyes shone red underneath the contact lenses. His animosity was palpable. There might have been heat behind his gaze, but his nin was colder than a glacier, and starting to crack like one, too. You are clouded by your hurt, Miwa went on, restraining her desire to snap at him. She worked hard to soften her tone, unintentionally seeing a different boy in front of her. One that she loved very much, and one who had already died after a childhood of misery. You're focusing on a tree when you should be looking at the forest. The phantom troop is a symptom, not the cause. Why put yourself through so much misery for an attempt to wipe away one symptom? You know, once they're gone another will take their place. The cycle will go on and on. The flesh market is too wide for one person to deal with, Kurapika spoke slowly, his tone coated with venomous ice. You don't have to be one person, she reminded him. The phantom troop is something I can do. And destroying the flesh market isn't? He didn't answer. How did you feel when you found out they were dead, she pressed. Did it make you feel better, or only more pathetic? Kurapika abruptly stood up, terrible pain on his face as his eyes burned with scarlet fury. He trembled from the weight of his anger, but none of it was directed at Miwa. He stared at her, words failing him as he tried to combat her words with logic. There was no logic to his emotions, though, and he knew that. He felt like a child, one who was just scolded over something so inanely stupid it filled him with shame. He laughed. Ah, that was heavy, whispered Gon uncomfortably when Kurapika slammed the hotel door shut behind him. I don't think I ever want to get a lecture from Miwa, Killua commented, eliciting a firm nod from Gon. Miwa huffed, her mood sour. I'm going to take a bath. Ah, I could use a bath too, Gon said, rotating his shoulders. Wanna join? I stole some bath bombs. Sure, Gon chirped as Killua's face turned 10 shades of red. As soon as Gon said yes, Killua turned back to Gon in disbelief. What? Gon and Miwa stared at Killua in confusion. You can't, you're Gon, you're a boy and Miwa's a girl. So? Miwa retorted, her eyes narrowed in frustration. You two got to take a bath together at Gon's place while I had to help his aunt with dinner. Why can't I? Yeah, Killua, stop excluding her, Gon said with a wide grin. You know exactly why. Killua said, his face molten. Whatever. If you want to stop being a sourpuss, you can join in, Miwa said dismissively, tired from getting so worked up earlier. She just wanted a bubble bath with yummy scents. She didn't see why Killua was getting so worked up. She remembered bathing with her faceless friends before. It was common for teams to bathe together on long or dangerous missions. Woohoo, bubble bath time! Gon cheered as he followed behind her. Killua fidgeted from one foot to the other until he let out a groan and followed after them. Don't leave me out. Crawlo. You're leaving tonight, said Crawlo. Crawlo would send the troop away. He would linger near the city to watch the fox girl for a few more days. He was admittedly intrigued by the child, and the potential fortune she would bring him. Even if she did know the chain user, Crawlo saw little value in risking the troop's existence to chase revenge. There wasn't even a guarantee the boy she knew was the one who killed Yuvajin. Or, worse, it was the same boy and the chain user was too big of a threat for his troop to handle. Crawlo had confidence, but he wasn't arrogant. He led a successful and thriving thieving life by carefully picking his fights. The chain user was an unknown variable who was already strong enough to deal with Uvajin on his own. Krallo could not, in sound mind, dismiss the possibility that the chain user could defeat his troop. Therefore, the best decision would be to send them away while he personally gathered further intel. He could use the fox girl to ascertain if the boy she knew was the chain user. From there, he could manipulate her into divulging further secrets about the boy or join hands with the golden fox, lead it to the city that fell from the sky. It will show you a lifelong son. Join hands? That line from his fortune nettled him. Joining hands implied friendship. Krallo thought it would have been more fitting if it said pull the strings of the golden fox, as that would have been closer to manipulate. The fact that it said join hands, though, perturbing, to say the least. We'll take the rest of the treasure tonight, Krallo went on to address his troop members back in their dilapidated warehouse. And that's the end of it. He did not see fit to tell the entire troop he planned on lingering behind to play with the fox girl. Only Phaeton and Finks were informed before Krallo made the address. Phaeton, because if Krallo decided to manipulate her he could be an easy way to do so, and Finks, because he was good with kids for that same reason. Nobunaga stood up from the concrete floor as lightning flashed behind Krallo from the broken window. Not yet. What else is there? Krallo asked, hoping he wouldn't bring up the fox girl. We have to find the chain user. You seem obsessed, observed Krallo. Yes, I am. We're going to leave without avenging Yuvo? Yuvo will be bored in the next world if we don't send the chain user to join him. Franklin cut in, cut it out, Nobunaga. The boss issued an order. Nobunaga nodded curtly. Yeah, and an order from the boss is absolute. But are you really speaking as our leader, Krallo? Nobunaga, growled Franklin. Shut up, snarled Nobunaga. I'm talking to Krallo. Thought Krallo. It was good that Nobunaga wasn't using the fox girl as a reason to stay. That meant even Nobugana didn't blindly trust her information and wasn't willing to stay behind for her. Which in turn meant that his desire to hunt down the chain user was fueled entirely by his thirst for vengeance, and he'd be willing to put the entire troop at risk for it. Nobunaga was a strong ninjutsu, but an awful tactician. In fighting would only hurt them further. They had already lost Uvajin, one of their better fighters. Being forced to kill Nobunaga for insubordination would be unsavory. Unfortunately, Nobunaga was not the type to be reasoned with. If he were, he wouldn't have spoken up in the first place. He was short-sighted, blinded from his loyalty to his friend. To Nobunaga, the troop was a family first, group of thieves second. To Krallo, the Phantom Troop was a legacy first, a group of thieves second, and a family third. The bigger picture mattered the most in the end. The spider had to survive. Nobunaga wanted the troop to stay in a situation where they lacked intel in a city they weren't prepared to fight in. Krallo wanted them to leave and reassess the situation after more information had been gathered. Krallo knew from his first fortune that members would die if they stayed in the city. The solution became obvious. Krallo stood up from his stone seat under the stormy window and he hopped down to join his followers. He approached Nobunaga, summoning his nun book in his right hand. Before I answer that, I need you to answer my question, Nobunaga. When is your birthday? The day you were born? Krallo clarified for the confused samurai. September 8th, in the year 70, answered Nobunaga. Blood type? B. Name? Nobunaga Hazama. You already know that. The hell is this about? What do you want to know next? No, that's enough, said Krallo, pulling out a sheet of paper from his nin book. Write all of that down on this paper. Why didn't you tell me to do that in the first place? Asked Nobunaga, exasperated. After Nobunaga had done so, Krallo took a seat on one of the boxes. He placed the paper in front of him on another box, summoned his nin book once more and triggered the fortune-telling nin ability he had stolen previously. His right hand wrote on its own as it laid out Nobunaga's fortune. Upon completion, Krallo handed it back to Nobunaga. Nobunaga accepted it with a confused face. What's this? A completely accurate fortune written in verse form. The ability to see the future. I stole this power from Nostrade's daughter. A completely accurate fortune? Each of the 4 verses predicts what will happen in that week. This is the fortune the daughter gave me yesterday, Krallo said, holding out his own fortune for Nobunaga to read. The calendar loses a precious component. The remaining months gather to mourn. The mourners play a melody, while the 11th moon quietly rises. The chrysanthemum withers and falls to lie on the ground beside bloody scarlet eyes. But you will remain supreme. After losing half your limbs, join hands with the golden fox, lead it to the city that fell from the sky. It will show you a lifelong sun. Is loses a precious component relating to? Krallo nodded. Yuvo. That girl didn't know anything about Yuvo. In other words, she predicted our attack on the mafia auction. And there were fans of her fortune telling among the 10 dons. Ah. That explains why the dons wanted the merchandise to move. I guess they weren't fast enough for that girl, though. What does Nobunaga's fortune say? Asked Shizuku. My hand wrote it on its own. Asked Nobunaga. Well, what does it say, Nobunaga? Nobunaga peered at his fortune. Next week, 5 of us will probably die. Which 5? Asked Franklin. No idea. I can't figure out what it all means. I kind of understand the second poem. The spider loses half its limbs. Finks cut in, the spider would be us? Yeah. The limbs would be the members, so half would be 6. That means 5 more after losing Yuvo. The same line was in my fortune, affirmed Krallo. That girl's in here, too, said Nobunaga, tapping at the last line. Krallo looked up at that, curious. She was in mine as well. What did yours say? The spider watches over the golden fox, read Nobunaga. Not join hands? Krallo thought, curious. Watches over implies paternity. Nobunaga was the first to take an interest in her. He never struck me as a father figure. Can I see? Shizuku asked, approaching Nobunaga. Nobunaga handed her his fortune and she read it over. She looked over at Krallo. Boss, can you tell my fortune? After completing the fortune, Shizuka read hers out loud. The calendar loses a precious component. The remaining months gather to mourn. You join your ally as an offering to keep him from being lonely. In the chamber of black merchandise, you will find endless sleep. Your greatest fear should be solitude. You have the most to fear when you are alone with another. I knew it, Shizuku said. I'm going to die next week. Seriously? Asked Franklin. Yeah, because I only got 2 poems, she said, holding up the paper. And Pakunita and Shellnark will die, as well. How do you know that? Nobunaga asked as Shellnark went spooky. Shizuku held up her poem. It seems the numbered months here refer to troop members. November is the 11th month, Yuvo was member 11. Yes, agreed Krallo. The chrysanthemum is the flower of September, it blooms in August the 8th month and withers in June. This refers to members 6, 8, and 9. And since the word falls is used, it implies death. The scarlet eyes, it matches up with a surviving member of the Kara clan, commented Finks. That fox girl said her friend was a Kara member. That gives motive, and now with this fortune it's likely he's the chain user. Does he die? How can I know? It only calls him bloody, so he'll probably survive. Nobunaga, this means we'll suffer serious casualties if we fight the chain user, Shellnark pointed out. We'll lose half our members. You and I have abilities that can be easily replaced, but Shizuku and Pakunita's are rare. The troop can't afford to lose them. Lightning and thunder cracked above them. Krallo said, today is Saturday of the first week. If we return home today, we won't run into the chain user next week. The best thing about these fortunes is that they tell us how to avoid catastrophes. If we leave here without fighting the chain user, this fortune is 100% certain to not come true. Nobunaga, you and Yuvo were our attack unit. Dying is just part of your job. I believe you both chose that role voluntarily. Yeah, that's right. Rain fell through the cracks in the ceiling above. Shizuku, Paku, and she'll collect intelligence. They provide our support. You could say they're our lifelines. Isn't it your job to serve as their shield? Yeah, it is, Nobunaga said firmly, his conviction wavering. Family first, vengeance second, Krallo thought. He had successfully persuaded Nobunaga. Hold on, drawled Hisoka. You should tell some of the other members' fortunes. Perhaps we could gather additional clues for avoiding the prophecy. Krallo had a very firm suspicion that Hisoka was up to something, but it's not a bad idea. More information shouldn't hurt the situation. Once the fortunes were passed around and everyone read theirs, Pakunada approached Hisoka and asked to read his. She sucked in air sharply in surprise when she read his fortune and asked everyone to gather around. A red-eyed customer will visit your shop, seeking to make a trade. The customer will use the sword of law upon you, taking the calendar's secrets with him. The 11-legged spider grows homesick, losing 5 more legs. Do not leave your temporary shelter, for you are one of those legs. Odd, Krallo thought. He had been certain the fortunes implied staying in the city would lead to death. He could have been wrong, but do the fortunes change upon actions? Because I decided for us to leave, they adjusted, or was I wrong in the first place? As soon as it was read aloud, Nobunaga approached Hisoka dangerously. Hisoka! Did you sell him out? Hisoka did not verbally respond. He continued to shuffle his cards while Nobunaga drew his sword. Infuriated, Nobunaga launched himself at Hisoka, swinging his katana, but before any connection could be made he was teleported to the ledge above. Nobunaga, be quiet, ordered Krallo. Hisoka, I'm going to ask you some questions. You don't have to answer if you can't. In the fortune, what does the taking secrets part mean? The powers of the troops members. Of how many members? 7, no 8. Uvajin, Shizuku, Maki, Franklin, Bakunada, Shalnirk, and I add up to 8. Krallo leaned back in surprise. So, you only found out about Kortopi's ability yesterday? That is correct. Krallo went on with his questions. What is his ability? I can't say. What does he look like? I can't say. What is your relationship to him? I can't say. Krallo looked away. I see. The red-eyed customer, the chain user, has 2 abilities at the very least. One would be the ability he used to capture Uvajin. The other would be the ability that restricts Hisoka's actions. Since the fortune uses the phrase sword of law, it must force a person to obey a set of rules. Like, don't lie to me, or do not reveal anything about me. Something like that. I would also guess that he planted something inside of Hisoka. The first half of the poem mentions a trade, but the second half only describes what the customer took. This suggests the sword of law attacked Hisoka. In other words, the sword of law attacked Hisoka and forced him to betray us. The sword that can restrict Hisoka's speech is powerful. Shalnir cleared his throat. To review, the enemy uses chains. A manipulator would be using real chains. If he's a conjurer, he killed Yuvo with Nen chains. A conjurer could appear empty-handed at any moment, which would give them a huge advantage. We might be able to find out more from that fox, but it's too early to make an assumption. The second half of his poem talks about being homesick, Finks pointed out. If he leaves this hideout, he could die. That sort of law probably means he can't fight against the chain user, guessed Franklin. Yuvo, Hisoka, Shizuku, Pakunada, Shalnirk. One more for half of the members. No one else's fortune predicted their death? Krallo asked. Then it has to be Phaeton, Kortopi, or me, said Finks. We didn't get our fortunes told because we lacked the data. I will be staying here. There are things I want to do before I die. I will not leave the temporary shelter, said Hisoka as he sat back down. Boss, what should we do? Krallo considered it for another minute. We stay. Let's split into groups. We'll spend the next week operating in these groups. Avoid being alone. Shizuku, Pakunada, and Maki. Kortopi, Finks, and Phaeton. Nobunaga and Shalnirk are with me. Banolanov, Franklin, and Hisoka will stay here. To play it safe, well, make some dummy hideouts. Kortopi, can you make 10? I can make 50. The instant anyone enters a fake hideout, I'll know, said Kortopi. There was a ding. A message from Krallo's phone. Message, can meet? Krallo read over the message. Only one person had been given this phone's number outside the troop. He replied with a yes, as he considered the time and place. To his surprise, she appeared before them in a flash of golden light. Her hair was slightly wet, and she wore a pink nightdress with white butterflies on it. Her cerulean eyes looked around the place until she spotted. She let out a shriek, jumping away and pointing dramatically at Hisoka. You stalked us here? Stalked? Nobunaga asked in surprise. You're stalking kids? Shellnark questioned Hisoka, a touch of disdain in his tone. Don't worry, kitten, I'll protect you, Miwa coached, leaping in front of Phaeton. I don't need protection, hissed Phaeton, clearly offended by her insinuation. Krallo coughed to cover up his amused smile. You wanted to talk, Miwa? Oh, right, she said, still glaring suspiciously at Hisoka. He won't attack, Krallo tried to soothe. If he does, say the word and I'll kick his ass. I'm not supposed to kill him till Gon kicks his but I can definitely maim, she said. I would appreciate it if you didn't maim any members of the troop, said Krallo. Her face screwed up like she bit into a rotten lemon. Ugh. He's a member? I have to say, I am severely disappointed by your judgment. Krallo did not smile, but he was amused by her. You wanted to talk? Yeah. Is now okay? She asked, curiously tilting her head. She twitched in surprise when Nobunaga draped an extra blanket over her shoulders. She looked up at him, blinking. Ha! Little girls shouldn't be teleporting into hideouts with nothing but a nightgown, said Nobunaga, his tone slightly scolding. Oh, she said. Krallo beckoned for her to take a seat beside him. Come. Let us talk. Not with him anywhere near me, Miwa firmly rejected, giving Hisoka a stink eye. Hisoka, go stand outside, said Nobunaga. It's raining. Take an umbrella. Chapter 21, Wolf Spider v. Miwa hummed happily to herself as she lounged on the bed and played with her phone. She still had the sweet smell of lavender in her nose from their bubble bath. The bath bomb turned out to be quite a delight, turning the whole thing into a sudsy palace that smelled delightful. Her mood had considerably improved since her argument with Kurapika, but when she thought about him. Stupid bastards, she sourly thought. Thinking about the situation left a bitter taste in her mouth. It was late and her best friends were sound asleep in their bed, but she was wide awake and mulling over what had happened. She gave up on rest after another hour. She reached for her phone and sent a message. To Krallo. Message, can meet? From Krallo. Message, yes. She snuck out as the storm hit a fever pitch. She placed a Horatian mark at their hideout, so she teleported there. She wasn't surprised to find that the warehouse had become nearly filled to the brim with boxes of loot they had stolen from the auction. She looked around, happy to find familiar faces, but then she saw. She let out a shriek, jumping away and pointing dramatically at Hisoka. You stalked us here? Wow. That's a determined masochist. Stalked? The samurai, Nobunaga, if she remembered correctly, asked in surprise. You're stalking kids? Shellnark questioned Hisoka, a touch of disdain in his tone. Maybe he's not here for you? Kurama idly guessed. Who else, the cutie? Don't worry, kitten, I'll protect you, Miwa declared as she leapt in front of Phaeton, hell-bent on making sure Hisoka didn't try anything. I don't need protection, hissed Phaeton, clearly offended by her insinuation. Krallo coughed. You wanted to talk, Miwa? Oh, right, she said, still glaring suspiciously at Hisoka. He won't attack, Krallo tried to soothe. If he does, say the word and I'll kick his ass. I'm not supposed to kill him till Gon kicks his but I can definitely maim, she said. I would appreciate it if you didn't maim any members of the troop, said Krallo. Ugh. Why do people keep wanting to keep him alive? He's so creepy. Wait, member? Her face screwed up like she bit into a rotten lemon. Ugh. He's a member? I have to say, I am severely disappointed by your judgment. I don't think I'll be joining the troop as long as Hisoka's in it. Krallo's nin glimmered in a way that reminded Miwa of when Kurama didn't want to admit he was amused by her. You wanted to talk? Yeah. Is now okay? She asked, curiously tilting her head. She twitched in surprise when Nobunaga draped an extra blanket over her shoulders. She looked up at him, blinking. Ha! Little girls shouldn't be teleporting into hideouts with nothing but a nightgown, said Nobunaga, his tone slightly scolding. Oh, she said, a little touched by his action. Surprisingly paternal. Paternal? Fatherly. Is that good? Only if you're comfortable with it. Krallo beckoned for her to take a seat beside him. Come. Let us talk. Not with him anywhere near me, Miwa firmly rejected, giving Hisoka a stink eye. Hisoka, go stand outside, said Nobunaga. It's raining. Take an umbrella. There was a bit more bickering back and forth, but Hisoka and a couple of the other members left the room. Miwa sat down on the wooden crate next to Krallo, hugging the blanket closer to her. She quietly asked, do you guys want to kill the chain user? He killed one of our own. You murdered his family, she retorted. She tilted her head. If he leaves you alone, will you leave him alone? Nobunaga narrowed his eyes. Yuvo is owed. And the chain user isn't, she asked, wanting to confirm. If you kill him, someone else will come after you guys again and everything will repeat itself. Krallo asked, can you make him not pursue us? If I can't, she said slowly, I will stop him for you. Why? Asked Maki. He reminds me of someone else, she said, uncertain how to put her feelings into words. She honestly didn't know how to accurately relay her thoughts. They were vague, flashes of memories and pain. Kurapika reminded her of someone else, and she could see him in Kurapika. It was more than that, though. Kurapika wasn't like her. Vengeance for someone like him felt wrong. She fidgeted, struggling to find words but failing. She would need to ponder it a bit further. The chain user, said Krallo carefully as he watched her fret, is someone we would like to avoid fighting. Boss, hissed Nobunaga, but Krallo looked back at him with apathy, then pointedly looked down at the piece of paper in Nobunaga's hands. Nobunaga clutched at it, looked away, then scoffed. Fine. Oh, that's good, she sighed with relief. You're not lying? Unlikely. That's not a no, that's not a no. Kurama snorted. If he lies to you, kill him. That'd be a shame. But he's clearly at least a little bad if he's defending Hisoka. Gon defends Hisoka. Gon is insane. This is true. Krallo kept looking at her, which made Miwa shift in her spot. Do you have plans after the auction? He asked her. Miwa blinked in surprise. Well. Still in her nightgown, Miwa decided it was time to talk with Kurapika again. Then she'd sleep away the day until Greed Island was up for auction, steal it, and conclude her business in the city. She was happy to come to some type of agreement with the Phantom Troop. That agreement meant shit if Kurapika was hellbent on his useless revenge. Therefore, it was time for Miwa to beat some sense into him. It was storming heavily outside. The rain made it hard to pick up Kurapika's scent, which meant Miwa had to rely on her nen-sensing capabilities. She was decent enough at it, but she was significantly better at tracking with her nose than her chakra. But the longer she put it off, the worse it would get. She'd prefer to kick his ass, then maybe they could get some breakfast, take a nap, and be done with the fiasco. She leapt from rooftop to rooftop. When she started to feel a touch cold from being absolutely soaked by the rain, she circulated chakra throughout her body to warm up. About 30 minutes into her hunt, she felt something. Something. It was Nen that was. It was indescribable. Perplexed, Miwa walked vertically down the building. She peered into one of the windows and saw something truly fascinating. There was a beautiful woman with long golden hair intricately woven together in an odd hairstyle. She wore a silky dress soaked in her blood. Her chest had been torn open, Miwa could see straight through it. She was plainly dead, yet her nen sung otherwise. A cat, large, fluffy, with an eerie smile, formed behind her made out of pure nen. Its smile stretched widely, full of malicious glee as it reached out a massive paw and grabbed at another man. Miwa could only see the man's back, and hear his blood-curdling scream of agony when the cat's paw touched him. What the fuck? Cried out another man. There were a dozen or so living men surrounding the deceased woman, with several more bodies laid strewn on the floor. Clearly there had been a scuffle. The men standing all wore the same suit. The man being picked up and... Is he melting? Miwa thought, utterly fascinated as she saw the man held by the cat turn into ooze. Even more surprising, the woman's wound began to mend itself. Her heart was regrown, lungs, ribs, everything stitched together by some unseen force. As the man died, the woman returned to life. What the fuck? That is so awesome. She's fucking coming back. Shoot her again. Kill her again, and again, whatever it takes. No way, Miwa thought, busting in through the window and decapitating the first man. Someone that awesome doesn't deserve to die. By the time Miwa had finished dispatching the rest of the men, the woman had fully come back to life. Her dress was utterly ruined, she was soaked in blood, and the otherworldly cat behind her was cackling with glee. She was the most beautiful thing Miwa had ever seen. Ahem! Miwa was in awe of the woman. The woman's icy blue eyes looked down at Miwa, then around the scenes. She smiled coyly and without warmth. "My savior." Said Miwa, flustered. "And no. I mean, I saw that was awesome. You're really cool." She laughed delicately. "Thank you. What is your name, girl?" "Miwa," she answered eagerly. "Miwa," the woman repeated. "What a lovely name." "Oh, thank you." Can I ask for yours?" "You do not know," the woman asked, bemused by her. "I am Camilla Hugoro, second prince to the Kaken Empire." Miwa blinked in surprise. "Royalty? She's a real-life princess or prince?" She vaguely remembered that Killua told her only outdated empires used the term princess as it was considered sexist. Modern empires use prince for all of their heirs, regardless of gender. Miwa beamed. "It's an honor, prince." Camilla's smile stretched a bit further. "It is. My dear, I have noticed you keep looking behind me. Do you see something?" "Your cat is super cute," exclaimed Miwa. "He looks so fluffy." "You can see him?" "Yep. Are you a nin user?" Camilla asked with intrigue. "You're so young." "I'm a hunter," Miwa declared proudly. She pulled out her IDs from her nightdress pocket, proudly holding it up. Camilla gracefully accepted the cards and raised an eyebrow. "Ah. A Zoldyck, that explains it. I must say, I am terribly impressed by you." "A what?" "Ha ha 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 ha." Kurama howled with laughter in Miwa's head as it took her several seconds to put the pieces together. "Killua put my last name as Zoldyck." She was honestly impressed, while that was smooth. Camilla handed back the cards, chuckling. "Tell me, Miwa Zoldyck, are you all ready for hire?" "Sure." "Lovely. I'll contact your family when I need you." "Sure," Miwa said agreeably, nodding furiously. "Please contact me whenever." I have a phone." "Ah. I don't know the number yet, but..." Miwa eagerly pulled out her Totoro 83 phone. Camilla accepted it, amused by Miwa's enthusiasm, and opened it up. "It says your number here. You can call me wherever," said Miwa. When Camilla handed Miwa's phone back, Miwa lightly brushed against the back of her palm where she subtly placed a Horatian marker. Her skin was velvety smooth. Camilla must have noticed what Miwa had done, but the gorgeous lady only kept smiling with lethal chillness. "I want to be her when I grow up. She's so cool. I wish I could have a nun cat." "Ahem." Miwa hurried to explain, "It'd be pointless to want a nun fox, because you're already the best fox." "I will enjoy seeing you serve under me, Miwa," purred the lady. Miwa's cheeks turned red and she spluttered. Kurama chuckled at her flustered state. "I better leave before I say something stupid to the prince." Back outside in the pouring rain, Miwa slapped her cheeks. "Okay. No more pretty ladies, I need to find Kurapika." Even though she thought that, it still took her 45 minutes to hunt down Kurapika. He was at a hotel, likely working as a bodyguard, so Miwa had to try to subtly get his attention outside. She stood on the outer wall, peering into the window. When he caught her eye, she waved him over. He sighed, went over. He opened the window, wah. She grabbed him by the collar and teleported him to a little flower meadow she had found when she first woke up. Thankfully, it wasn't raining there. "Miwa," Kurapika said sharply. "What are you doing?" "We need to sort this out," she said stubbornly. "I talked to the troop. They won't bother you, if you don't bother them." "That is none of your..." "It is my business," she snapped. Well, I made it my business, you stupid stupid bastard." Kurapika glared at her. "I'm not changing my mind. The phantom troop deserve to die." "More than the flesh market," she countered. "I can't." "I can," she insisted. "I can." "You don't have to do this alone, you stupid bastard." Stop calling me a stupid bastard. Stop acting like a stupid bastard then. The two were in each other's faces, their cheeks red from anger as they glowered furiously at one another. Miwa broke off first, sighing roughly. I get why you want that stupid thing. I get it. But I feel like if you chase after it the way you're gonna end up regretting it. That's not for you to decide, Kurapika coldly returned. Yeah, she agreed softly. Ultimately it is your choice. But as your FR, as you're free, as someone who cares enough about you, it is my right to do whatever I can to make sure you don't get yourself killed or worse. Kurapika barked out a laugh. Worse? The worst case scenario is that I fail. No. The worst case scenario is that while you've been focusing on chasing after a group of thieves, the flesh market targets another clan with your eyes. You fail to kill the troop, and the flesh market goes unpunished. Everything you did was meaningless. I can't do anything about the market. I can. I can. Miwa shouted. I know I can. You're smart, but I have the power. Use me. In the distance, thunder rolled. It better not rain here, too, Miwa thought sourly. Even in the dark, Miwa could clearly pick out Kurapika's facial expression. There was indigent anger, but there was a flicker of something else. His glacial nin had cracks, and his chains rattled ominously. His face and nin screamed conflicted. She could see it in his eyes, he wanted her help. No, he didn't want her help. He just didn't want to be alone in it. Miwa held out her hand to him, her heart skipping a beat as she dared to hope that maybe she finally said the right things. Maybe, just maybe, tragedy could be averted. Kurapika, under all that ice and pain, had a good heart. He wasn't as sunny as Gon, but she thought he felt kinder. Gon could be sweet, but there was a callous curiosity that took precedence over empathy. Gon, Killua, and Miwa were three who were comfortable in bloodshed and violence. Kurapika was not. He had a gentle soul that did not belong in their world. He and Sasuke were not meant for such darkness. Miwa could completely understand why he'd want vengeance, but he simply wasn't the type of person who could take utter revenge and walk away unscathed. Miwa could slaughter hundreds of thousands of humans and sleep peacefully the following night. Death meant nothing to her, and lives only held value if she personally placed value in it. Kurapika could never do such a thing, which was why his vengeance was ultimately detrimental and useless. Don't seek revenge. Seek to defend, she whispered to him. Motive meant everything. Fight to protect, not to hurt. Choice meant everything. Use that brilliant mind of yours to make sure no one hurts the way you do now. Kurapika's hand trembled, his scarlet eyes burning underneath the contacts he used to disguise them. He tentatively placed his hand in Miwa's and he said, "Prove to me you have the power." Okay, she agreed. In that remote, isolated clearing, where not a single human soul could be found for hundreds of miles, Miwa showed Kurapika exactly what it meant to be a Jinchuriki. Miwa returned back to their hotel room wearing only Kurapika's suit jacket. She hadn't anticipated Kurama's chakra destroying her clothes, neither had Kurama or Kurapika. Kurama said it made sense since they, the world they were in now, had never encountered his chakra before and none of their clothes were made with chakra woven in for durability. Which meant Miwa had to figure out how to weave chakra in clothes if she didn't want to fight naked every time she pulled out Kurama's cloak. It wasn't much of an issue currently, but the thought of fighting Hisoka or someone similar without anything. She nearly vomited at the thought. Killua and Gon were already up. Killua looked her over in surprise. What are you wearing and what happened? Miwa took a deep breath, then explained everything. Wow, said Gon. During the explanation, Miwa had changed into her other set of pajamas. That sounds exhausting. How come you haven't shown us all your powers? Asked Killua. Do you want to see them? How dare you even ask that, said Gon. Okay, I can show you both, she agreed. But then I want to sleep. Okay, the boys agreed. Before I forget, though, she said, pointing an accusatory finger at Killua. You put my last name as Zoldyck. Yep, he said with a cat-like smirk. Welcome to the family. Clever little shit. Chapter 22, Wolf Spider 6. One more time, Miwa launched another Biju bomb into the air. Its explosion was so massive that it shook the ground where Gon, Killua, and Miwa laid. The force was powerful enough that Gon and Killua could only lay back in the grass and watch it from above. Can you make it a different color? Asked Gon. Do it again, said Killua. I dunno about changing its color, said Miwa. Let me ask Kurama. No. He said no. And Kurama is a demon that is in your soul or whatever? Something like that. Through the power of Fuinjutsu? Gon wanted to clarify. Yeah. So Fuinjutsu can seal demons inside you that you can befriend and they give you crazy powers? Yeah. I'm so happy I'm learning that, said Killua while Gon pouted. Why does it have to be so hard to learn? Complained Gon. Ugh. Why can't it just be punching something really good? I can punch. I'm the best at punching. Killua turned his head to look at Miwa. Can Kurama come out? Under circumstances. Sometimes, said Miwa. He doesn't like humans a whole lot. Ah. We can be friends, Kurama. Gon said cheerfully. Humans tend to want to destroy creatures stronger than them, Miwa said, reciting what Kurama was telling her. We won't be like that, promised Gon. Oh sure. That's what they all say. Humans preach they'll be accepting, but as soon as a new creature appears that's stronger than them, they freak out and immediately move to destroy, detain, or conquer it. They will never coexist with their own predators. Gon and Killua aren't like other humans. Faye. Can they swear that? Can they coexist with their predator? He asked. Can you swear that? Sure, said Gon. Right, Killua? I won't kill you if you won't kill me, said Killua. Then, said Miwa slowly, we think we can pull you into a shared genjutsu. Later though, because Kurama still doesn't want to talk to either of you. What a stinker. I know, he's a bit of a tsundere. Shut the fuck up, I am not. Killua snorted. A demon tsundere? Yeah. Super Tsun. Gon sat up to readjust his position so he could rest his head on Miwa's stomach. Miwa looked down at him and he said, the grass was getting uncomfortable. Understandable, she agreed. Killua stared at the two for a moment, then shrugged and used Gon's belly as his own pillow. He pulled Miwa onto his own stomach so the three children made a triangle of shared pillowhood. Seriously, can you do another one? Asked Gon. Sure. The following day was one spent in relaxation. Gon and Killua were still determined to try and make up the money to purchase Greed Island, so they set out early in the morning with Leo Rio to do that. Miwa was unbothered, she had complete faith in her thieving abilities, so she decided to spend the day relaxing in the hotel. She ordered room service, used some fancy stay-in conditioner on her hair that Gon got her, and in general had a bit of a pamper day. There was something called a salon near the hotel that she overheard other ladies talk about that she decided to try out. The ladies said it made their hair super soft afterward, and Miwa was always down for soft things. In the afternoon she headed out to the salon, a spring in her step. She was surprised to find Kurapika in the hotel lobby. He must have been on his way to visit her. Miwa, said Kurapika, his voice soft. Miwa was happy to see there was an underlying warmth to his core, and the once fragile glacier no longer had so many cracks. She smiled, a part of her hopeful that maybe he would be different. Maybe Kurapika wouldn't be Sasuke. She turned to face him fully, giving him her undivided attention. I wanted to confirm with you. I'm going to investigate thoroughly, he said. I'm going to get the names, places, everything. When the time comes, can I call on you? Miwa pulled out one of her Hiraishin tags that she kept in her pockets. All you need to do is damage this. I'll come to you immediately. Thank you, he said, accepting it with a small smile. We're really going to do this, aren't we? Yeah. We really are. Destroy the flesh market. Someone like you should be a protector, not an avenger, she murmured. Maybe, Kurapika allowed. Miwa. MN? He placed a hand atop her head, patting her. Thank you. Miwa smiled brightly up at him. You're welcome. The salon was neat, if a bit smelly. It was a good way to eat up time until dinner. After dinner, Miwa ordered food all by herself, which she felt very proud about. She had to head back to the hotel to change into her thief outfit. She was delighted to find Gon and Killua were already back. The three chatted for a couple of hours, getting sidetracked by different conversations. Then the clock chimed at 7. It was time. Time to steal the Greed Island games. Miwa donned up her costume, excitement bursting inside her. She hugged Killua and Gon goodbye, then headed off. Unfortunately, by the time she got to the auction house, everything was already stolen. No. Ha 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 ha. They beat you. No. I actually lost. Ha 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 ha. In a hurry, Miwa teleported to the Phantom Troop hideout. Her eyes were wide with shock as she looked around the warehouse to see the members. Not many of them reacted to her presence. The few that did offer her courtesy nods. She was a touch disheartened to see that Phaeton literally speedwalked out of the room. What a pity! Nobanunara cheerfully waved at her. Miwa! Had a feeling you'd show up. The games, she blurted out, rapidly looking around the room. Don't worry, came the gentle voice of Krallo. Miwa's eyes flickered up to where the leader sat atop rubble. I have 2 copies here for you. 2. Miwa blinked in surprise. Oh, right. She supposed she wouldn't be needing the 3rd one. Miwa shifted anxiously, her brow slightly furrowed. She had forgotten to broach the subject with Gon and Killua. Flashback. Krallo kept looking at her, which made Miwa shift in her spot. Do you have plans after the auction? He asked her. Miwa blinked in surprise. Well, my friends and I are looking for Gon's dad. I guess they have to play and beat a video game. A video game? Yeah. I'm not very good at them, mumbled Miwa as she thought about the time Killua showed her the arcade at Heaven's Arena. She was downright terrible at it. The flashing buttons and noise was overwhelming. She didn't like fighting things that didn't have a smell, or even heartbeat. Killua said the game would probably take them a long time to beat. Miwa knew she wouldn't be of any help, so she'd likely just be sitting around. Which sounded crazy boring. She had hoped to talk to them about her visiting another city while they beat the game. She'd come right back to them when they were done with it, of course, but she'd rather not sit on her butt and stare at a screen all day every day for weeks. It screamed against her predator instincts to be still for so long. She liked to move. To feel the world around her. To find more fluff. She had to admit she was intrigued about Meteor City ever since she read about it at Gon's home. A city for the unwanted and trash. She knew a thing or two about being unwanted. She wondered if perhaps, when she died. I dunno what I'll be doing while they play, she confessed to Krallo. Would you like to accompany me to Meteor City? He asked her. Huh? Miwa's eyes widened. Can he read minds? Doubtful. Miwa stammered for a response, genuinely caught off guard by his question. She had been pondering it, but she hated the idea of leaving Gon and Killua. She had rapidly grown attached to them over the nearly year-long adventure they had been on. She would deeply miss not being able to sleep and wake up next to them. Why not go? Those brats are your friends, which means some distance and time apart won't hurt. It'd only be while they're playing that stupid game. You don't think they'd be upset? Only one way to find out. Don't hold back on account of others. Do what you want. You've more than earned that right. I'd like that, whispered Miwa. Krallo did not smile, but she thought his nun did. End flashback. Miwa carefully accepted the Greed Island copies Krallo held out to her. She said, who else will travel with us? No one else for now, he murmured quietly to her. And your friends are okay with that? Miwa said, glancing around. While none had voiced their disdain for the idea, she had noticed that a fair few had given her a suspicious look when Krallo asked her in the first place. They won't go against it, he said. Take care, Miwa. I'll see you tomorrow. MN. See you tomorrow. Miwa returned to the hotel room, holding up the 2 copies of the game. Killua and Gon grabbed each one, both grinning at her. Nice. Killua praised. Miwa shook her head, frowning. No. The troop beat me to it. They gave me these copies. Oh. You'll beat them next time, consoled Gon as he patted her shoulder. We'll help. Miwa didn't respond right away. Gon and Killua were examining the game copies. Killua had flipped on extra lights in the hotel room as they studied the cases the games had come in. Pretty good condition, observed Killua, tilting it at different angles under the light. Gon nodded, looks brand new. Think it is? Killua shrugged. It didn't advertise it one way or the other. We'll need to find a place to play it next. We can. I want to go to Meteor City, she blurted out, unable to hold it in any longer. Killua and Gon looked up at her. Killua was the first to respond, sure. Gon said, okay. Miwa's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. Why you're not upset? I mean, we kinda figured you wouldn't want to play a video game the whole time, said Killua with an easy smile. I'm relieved you told us what you wanted to do. Gon was starting to freak out. I was not, said Gon blandly. You were freaking out, worried she'd be too bored. Killua's cheeks turned red. You're the one that said something first. I only said it because you were thinking it. Idiot, how could you know what I'm thinking? Because you're so obvious. Gon stuck out his tongue. You're the idiot, dummy. Miwa giggled when Killua threw a pillow at Gon. She said, thanks. Gon ducked under the pillow. He grinned brightly at her. Course. We're friends. When we beat the game, we'll call you. Please, said Killua firmly, please double-check your texts before you send them. EA. Do not finish that, Killua hissed. Gon and Miwa Weasley did not finish. He sighed. He set the case down onto the bed, his pale eyes matching Miwa's gaze. It's okay to spend some time apart. We're not going to stop being friends. Fiancés, coughed Gon. Killua pulled Gon into a headlock as he continued, we're not going to stop being friends. We'll always be friends. Always? Asked Miwa, a small quiver in her voice. Always and always, he promised her with a smile. Can't breathe, whimpered Gon in Killua's headlock. Chapter 23, Hyena Eye. The day it was time to leave was bittersweet. The three friends lingered in their hotel bed for most of the morning, none of them really wanting to get up. Eventually Gon's stomach growled, forcing the children to start their day. After eating a late breakfast in their room, it was time for Miwa to head out. Miwa first hugged Gon tightly, a part of her wishing they'd ask her to stay regardless. Gon patted her back as he warmly soothed her, don't worry, Miwa. As soon as we beat the game, we'll call you. Miwa buried her nose in the crook of his neck, committing his smell to her memory. Her voice was muffled as she mumbled, promise? Gon gave her a firm squeeze. Pinky promise. The two held each other for another minute until Miwa pulled away to start hugging Killua. Before she could do so, Killua held out something to her. Killua's smile was soft and sweet. Here. You're going to need this. Miwa curiously tilted her head as she accepted the item. What's this? It's a breathing mask. It'll filter out the worst of the smell, explained Killua. Meteor City. It's pretty bad. Considering you struggled at Heaven's Arena, I figured you'd definitely need something. Ah. Miwa sheepishly smiled, carefully tucking the mask away in the backpack they had packed the previous night. Storage scrolls were lovely, but she needed something to carry all of her storage scrolls too. A storage scroll could only be placed inside another storage scroll about 5 times before the chain would degrade the original scroll. Which meant she couldn't infinitely pack storage scrolls in one storage scroll, which was such a shame. Once that was put away, she rushed into Killua's outstretched arms. She hugged him firmly, burying her face in the crook of his neck like she had with Gon. Killua tenderly patted the back of her head. There. We'll meet again, Miwa. I know, she mumbled, closing her eyes. I'm going to miss you both a whole lot. We'll miss you, too, murmured Killua. The two held each other for a couple more minutes and then Killua stepped back, slightly red in the face. Gon and Miwa were both physically affectionate people, constantly seeking out contact. They were extra clingy in their sleep. It wasn't uncommon to find the two using each other like body pillows in the morning. Killua hadn't received much in the way of physical affection growing up, and so he wasn't used to being randomly hugged or having someone grab his hand without warning. He had improved a lot over the past months, but he still got flustered or embarrassed if it went on for too long. Miwa hoisted her backpack over her shoulder. She was supposed to meet Krallo at the airport soon. She offered the two boys one big smile, kissed their cheeks, then headed off. Krallo had arranged private transportation to the only airport near Meteor City. The two would have to walk the rest of the way there. He met Miwa outside the airport with a polite nod. Good morning, she greeted him, her stomach flip-flopping anxiously. Good morning, he returned cordially. Have you flown before? On an airship a couple times, she admitted. Good, this won't be much different. Planes are faster, so the flight will only take about 6 hours or so. MN. Miwa fiddled with her pigtails as Krallo guided her onto the plane. As they were the only passengers, it was completely silent in the cabin. Miwa took a seat on the right and Krallo took a seat on the left. The plane took off roughly 20 minutes later. Krallo wasn't the sort to start small talk, and Miwa felt strangely shy. She hadn't realized how comforting she found Gon and Killua until they were no longer at her side. Gon had done a lot of the talking for her when they had to meet with a stranger, and Killua was the one who read things to her. She had learned more of the language than when she first arrived, but it wasn't at a level where she felt she could read a book on her own or anything. She wasn't overly fond of humans in general and didn't know how to. How did she even become friends with Gon and Killua in the first place? It had been several months and she couldn't remember the exact details. She thought one of them approached her and the rest was easy. Miwa didn't have to be the one to carry the conversation because Gon and Killua were naturally charismatic, especially Gon. Gon could jabber about anything to anyone. Talking with them was as natural and comfortable as breathing. Miwa hadn't even realized how much strength she drew from their presence until it was gone. She supposed she shouldn't have been surprised. Prior to the exam, Miwa hadn't approached anyone. The people that did approach her, she spurned or walked away from. She didn't need to worry about others, but now she had others to worry about. During the flight out, she snuck glanced over at Krallo. "How do you make friends?" Miwa asked Kurama. Asking the wrong demon, Kit. "How do you make friends?" blurted out Miwa. Krallo, who had been reading from a book, looked over at her. The man's face was almost always stoic, but Miwa found his eyes could be expressive. There was a glimmer of amusement and curiosity. He asked, "Why would you like to know?" Miwa shrugged. Isn't it a good thing to know?" Krallo tilted his head as he considered it. "Depends. How do you value friendship?" Miwa frowned. "Friends make you feel good. Good food makes you feel good," he pointed out. "Do you want friends or good food?" Miwa's brow furrowed. Friends, It's different, isn't it?" "I don't know, is it?" I think so," she answered slowly. "I dunno. If it was a choice between good food or my friends, I'd pick my friends." Krallo shut his book, turning slightly in his seat to better face her. "Then clearly there is a difference. Aside from feeling good, what else do friends provide you?" Miwa chewed on the inside of her cheek as she thought. They're fun to be around, they make you laugh. As can a comedian, said Krallo. Would you rather have good food and a comedian to make you laugh, or your friends? My friends, answered Miwa. I dunno how to put it. When I'm with my friends, I feel strong, happy, and warm. When they laugh, I laugh. When they're hurting, I hurt. I miss them when they're not with me, and I feel out of sorts. Like a piece of me is gone. Krallo tapped on the armrest. By that description, a friend to you is someone that you love. Miwa processed that. I guess so, yeah. So, when you ask, how do you make a friend, you're really asking, how can you either find someone else to love, or how can you come to love another person? Miwa couldn't quite follow what he was saying, but it sounded right, so she nodded. Krallo's lips twitched. Do you have someone in mind? You, she said as if that were the most obvious thing in the world. To her, it was. Krallo was going to be her companion in Meteor City. It'd be a lot more fun if he became her friend like Gon and Killua. MN. Krallo's eyes glittered with amusement. How direct. Is that bad? No. Direct is good, he assured her. Miwa hesitantly asked, see, can I be your friend? We can certainly try, he said. Fair warning, I've been told I make for dull company. Fair warning, I can't read. For the first time since she met him, Miwa heard Krallo quietly chuckle. Miwa smelled Meteor City before she laid eyes upon it. With her clones, she had set up a decent Hyratian network. They had explored so many cities and countries, making it a little bit further away each time she summoned them and sent them out. None had ever gone near Meteor City because of the wretched stench that permeated the air. They had tried, but the smell would grow so terribly they would eventually retch so violently they'd pop themselves. Oh boy, Miwa thought as she slowly pulled out the mask Killua got her. It came with a few filters that would last about a week. A week should be enough to take care of it, she thought with narrowed eyes. Meteor City was the dumping ground of the unwanted. Killua had given her a basic rundown of what to expect about the city. Most of the inhabitants don't have any personal track records. The city had become a huge source of untraceable hitmen, assassins, prostitutes, thieves, slave traders, and pretty much anything illegal in other countries. Taking advantage of that exploit, the mafia community often invested a lot in the city so they could always have a huge reserve of assassins. Word on the grapevine was through that the mafia was pulling away from a bit to recover the massive amount of losses accumulated from the underground auction. On top of which, apparently, the 10 Dons, the 10 major leaders of the mafia, had been assassinated during that whole fiasco, which meant that the mafia as a whole is in utter chaos and would be rebuilding for a few months. Now was the ideal time for Miwa to assess Meteor City for herself and enact her plan if she saw fit to do so. Killua also warned her that his mother told him that the inhabitants shared remarkable bonds that had been described as thinner than water, and yet thicker than blood. To the point they were ready to lay down their own lives for their fellow denizens if someone is perceived as an outside threat. It was still hell on earth for the people inside the city, but only citizens of Meteor City could hurt other citizens of Meteor City. For some reason. Finally, Killua told her that Meteor City was run as a gerontocracy. Killua's father told him that they tended to make counterproductive decisions over logic. That wasn't surprising considering they lived in a literal garbage city and had done nothing to remedy that fact. Miwa didn't understand what a gerontocracy government was, so Killua had to explain that to her as well. A gerontocracy was when power within the ruling class accumulates with age, making the oldest the holders of the most power. Those holding the most power may not be in formal leadership positions, but often dominate those who are. In a simplified definition, a gerontocracy is a society where leadership is reserved for elders. Miwa hoped that meant they were easier to kill. Beware the old man that is still alive in a field where the young die, Kurama warned. I won't let them stop what I have planned. Be confident, not blindly arrogant. I know. There was one more thing Miwa had to keep in mind about the city. Their motto, we'll accept anything you leave here, but don't ever take anything away from us. If that didn't scream spite, she'd be surprised. What are you wanting to do? Krallo asked as they walked through the barrens towards the nasty smell. Miwa did not answer him right away. She peered up at the hot sun. A home. Krallo made an acknowledging noise. A home? For the unwanted. One that isn't seeped in garbage. One man's garbage is another man's treasure. It's literal garbage that reeks. Does it even have clean water? Sometimes. Miwa sighed. Killua told me it's some kinda old man government. Krallo nodded. Gerontocracy. Do you know the leaders? I know a few. Do you care about their lives? Not really. Silence fell between the two. That was something Miwa had quickly come to understand about Krallo. He wasn't the sort to make small talk. He was perfectly comfortable being in complete silence for hours on end. Miwa wasn't as charismatic as Gon, so she found it hard to force conversation. The end result was that the two spent a lot of time in a lulling quiet peace. For hours, they walked steadily on to the city. Krallo was the first to speak again when it was nearly nightfall. Did your friend tell you about the tramp incident? The what? Meteor City is not a place that gets involved with other governments, began Krallo. Miwa tucked one of her pigtails over her shoulder and cocked her ear to better listen to him. As he wasn't prone to talking, that meant whatever he had to say was important. Or at least that's how Miwa viewed it. The last time they reached out was 10 years ago, the tramp incident. A tramp without papers was arrested for murder. Because he was from Meteor City, there was no legal paperwork, he didn't exist in their system. The police refused to listen to him, or to even consider that he was innocent, so they forcefully extracted a confession. His appointed lawyer did nothing to assist him, and the judge condemned the tramp. 3 years later, the real murderer was arrested and the crime was brought to public attention. Shortly after the tramp's innocence was revealed, a total of 31 people consisting of the police, judges, inspectors, witnesses, jurors, and lawyers who took part in the false accusation of the tramp were assassinated. The assassins attached bombs to their chests to eat with their victims all at the exact same time in different locations. Because one of their companions was falsely condemned, 31 people sacrificed themselves in the name of revenge. That's so fucking stupid it literally hurts my head to think about, sighed Miwa. Krallo inclined his head toward her. There is no education system in Meteor City. At best there is indoctrination. But that is the type of enemy you face, Miwa. Those who have nothing to lose, and everything to gain by their enemy's death. Miwa sighed. They're definitely going to hate me the first week. What are you planning? Miwa glanced over at Krallo and offered him a smile. I told you. I'm going to make my home. Even if that means destroying everything first. Krallo did not respond, his expression was impossible to read. Destroy Meteor City? At the very least, she said cheerfully, getting rid of all the trash. Krallo smiled humorlessly. I have a feeling you aren't referring to the discarded items in the city. She laughed, not refuting. Meteor City was a city literally built on garbage. Humans inside lived like rats, feeding on the discarded junk. The economy was abysmal yet somehow operational. The currency was useless, people bartered and traded for services or goods. If the stench was bad, the sight was worse. The lack of medical care, consistent clean water, food, really basic human rights, and forced to live in garbage resulted in a lot of deformities, malnutrition, skin diseases, and so forth. As the two neared the city, Miwa was disgusted to witness children crawling in and out of garbage like cockroaches. The sores, blisters, and other painful scars on their bodies made her uncomfortable. She made clones to assess the city, and within an hour, they confirmed the worst-case scenario. It was disgusting. Those too weak to fight children, or particularly weakened adults, be it men, women, or whatever, were sold as slaves. In certain dirty parts of the streets, they were sold as meat. Some dangling by their ankles, still alive, but missing their limbs and chunks of flesh as they were bartered off bit by bit for something else. Her clones listened to the sounds of soft cries, flesh tearing, deranged laughter, and so many things she had never heard before but still made her skin crawl. Meteor City was the city of trash, and the people inside were the product of their environment. Krallo took a seat on one of the piles of garbage next to Miwa. It was dark, there was very little light in Meteor City at night, but neither were bothered by it. Krallo saw her send out the clones, and so he waited for her. When the last of the clones popped and the memories returned to Miwa, she let out a slow breath. She felt gross, the things she now had to keep in her head were revolting. As if she had swallowed a sickly slime that would never leave her. Her stomach was queasy, and her hands trembled from revulsion. Krallo looked up at the starry sky and said, "There are no lights in Meteor City." Miwa followed his gaze. She was surprised at how vivid the night sky could be seen. She had forgotten how lovely the stars could look. She, Killua, and Gon had been staying in cities for the past several months, and the skylights made it hard to see the stars. But that makes it easier to find the stars, he murmured. I don't want to take away the stars, Miwa said, closing her eyes as a plan formulated in her head. Can you have it both ways? He asked her. I'm a very greedy fox. I'll make it happen. He smiled thinly. I look forward to seeing what you do. Miwa pursed her lips, voicing a question she's had for a while. Krallo? How come you're helping me? I'm curious what an eternal sun looks like, he answered. What? He continued to smile, never elaborating further. If Miwa used half of her chakra and half of Chroma's chakra, she could create about a few 100,000 clones. She didn't have an exact number, and it wasn't a limit she liked to reach often. When they all popped, it was a rush of memories and sensory overload that took her some time to sort out. She was more comfortable summoning 10,000 clones, as it would only take a minute to process the memories, but for the task up ahead it was best to start strong. Before dawn had even begun, Miwa used half of her chakra, and half of Kurama's chakra, to summon some hundreds of thousands of clones. It could have been 200,000, or it could have been 800,000. When reaching the 9 digits, Miwa stopped accepting their memories and everything muddled together when popped, so there was no way for her to definitely know the amount. Regardless, it was a huge amount. There were enough of them to spread out to the bottom circumference of the city, each armed with a cloned copy of a storage scroll. Cloned versions of scrolls weren't recommended for regular use, but they were perfect for what Miwa had in mind. Cloned storage scrolls could accept things inside them, but trying to remove anything resulted in them popping and disappearing. In other words, an easy way to get rid of trash. Her clones were given simple instructions. 1. Sift through the trash. 2. Throw out what is not needed. 3. If the material could be used for construction, place it in non-clone storage. 4. Answer honestly when asked what they were doing. If a leader wants to approach Miwa, let them. 5. If confronted, either use genjutsu to turn them away or kill them. That was it. Miwa couldn't do much with the city as it currently stood. The infection needed to be removed. Krallo and Miwa sat at the outskirts, watching as the swarm of little pigtailed clones meticulously tackled the mess of Meteor City. Krallo pulled out a small protein bar from his jacket pocket and held it out to Miwa. I don't think I'll be able to take off the mask for a while, she apologized to him. When there's a break, I'll teleport us both to a nearby city for some food, assuming you want to come along? Krallo cocked his head. I don't see a reason to say no. Have your clones encountered any problems so far? None have popped. Looks like people are just watching for now. That would remain accurate for the next few hours. They were eventually approached by a man wrapped in raggedly clothes and wearing a full-face breathing mask. His voice was raspy as he said, "Good morning, children." "Good morning, Elder," acknowledged Krallo. "Elder?" Miwa peered at the man. She couldn't smell him through her mask, nor could she read his expression because of his mask. His nin was odd, hot and cold at once, a whirlpool of contrasting temperatures. "Good morning," greeted Miwa. The elder did not respond immediately, rather, he took a seat in between Krallo and Miwa. Once situated, he said, "Odd morning. I suspect the next few weeks will be odd," observed Krallo. "Amen." The elder watched the clones work. "I got to start my day off with some snakes waking me up and complaining about the noise." Krallo made an acknowledging noise. "Then a bulldog came in after them and started howling at the moon," sighed the elder. "I was going to the tea party later, you see? But now there is no tea party. Someone got rid of the tires." Miwa stared blankly. The elder then turned to face Miwa. "They were perfectly nice tires that you stole. Where have you taken them? How are we supposed to have our tea parties without tires? You need good tires for tea parties." Miwa opened her mouth to respond, but no answer came out. "It's terribly rude of you," he scolded her. "What are you going to do to fix this?" I am fixing it," she hesitantly responded. "Fixing it by destroying it? How barbaric." Miwa bit her bottom lip. Don't you need to break eggs to make a cake? A cake for the tea party? A cake," he repeated blandly. "A cake instead of tires? Madness. Next you'll tell me the sun comes out at night." "Ah, but the sun will come out at night," said Krallo, drawing the elder's attention back to him. "A night sun?" The elder was aghast. Krallo's eyes were on the sky. His voice softly somber as he said, "Meteor City is a city of night. We can see the stars, but they remain cold and distant. It's all we've ever known, that beautifully dangerous night. Don't you think that it's time to see the morning?" The elder tisked. "Nonsensical. Impossible. It won't happen." It will," said Miwa. "I'm going to make it happen." "Oh ho! You're going to make it happen?" "I'll believe that cakes make for better things at tea parties than tires, then believe that." Miwa raised an eyebrow. "Cakes are better for tea parties than tires." "Blasphemy. What about the rusted irons? The dried blood on the saucers?" demanded the elder. Miwa shook her head, unable to think of a response. The elder threw up his hands in exasperation. "You know nothing of tea parties. I expect my tires back by the end of the day or you'll owe me big, child." "You aren't getting your tires back," muttered Miwa. "You're getting a damn cake and you're going to like it." Although Miwa could not see his face, she had a feeling the elderly man was glaring at her. He snapped, "Know your place, child." "I know my place," she retorted, "but perhaps it's time for you to relearn your place." He wagged a finger at her. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Miwa stuck out her tongue. Deeply offended, the man left in a huff. "If he's one of the leaders, I think I'm in for a headache." "Biju bomb?" "Not yet." Another 3 hours crept by. The clones had made a good dent in the trash. Some citizens did try to kill them repeatedly, but the clones hogtied and tossed them aside. If they kept trying to pop the clones, then the clones slit their throats. Miwa didn't want to completely empty the city out, she needed some population, but she wasn't going to let them keep harassing her. There were a couple of suicide bombers, but they were laughably slow and easy to avoid. Not to mention their explosions weren't strong enough to do much more than knock Miwa off her feet. As the sun started to set on the first day of cleaning, Miwa's stomach rumbled. Once it was dark, she'd teleport both of them to another city to eat and rest. Krallo reached forward, gently brushing back her bangs. Do you have any idea how to build a city? And no, Miwa admitted sheepishly. But, well, there is someone I thought I could ask. Miwa pulled out her adorable phone. She had received the text message the same day Gon and Killua set her up with the phone, but hadn't done anything about it. From, unknown. Message, hello dear, it's Kikyo. Be sure to save this number in your phone and call me if you need anything. Tell Killua to be safe and hurry home. Miwa chewed on the inside of her cheeks as she stared at the message. She didn't want to be a bother, especially to one of her best friend's mother, but she wasn't sure who else to ask. Krallo was a thief, not a builder, and Kikyo seemed like a very smart lady to Miwa. Plus, she was a mom, and weren't moms supposed to know everything? At the very least, Kikyo ought to be able to point Miwa in the right direction. Feeling an urge of shyness, Miwa fiddled with her hair for another minute before she pinched her cheeks. Okay. I can do this. She clicked call. 1 ring, 2 rings. Hello, darling, answered a saccharine voice. How are you today? Bonus TTEU, in which Miwa, Killua, and Gon have traveled back to this point in time with all the knowledge and skills they possess at the end of the series. After the hunter exam. Yeehaw! Let's go build my empire. Miwa said cheerfully. Woohoo, let's never go back to Greed Island, exclaimed Killua. The 3 companions hoisted their newly acquired hunter licenses. Gon pouted. Ah. I kind of had fun at Greed Island. Remember Biscuit? You mean Bargain Bin Miwa, snarked Killua. I don't want to think about her ever again. She was a great teacher. She kept slapping me. Yeah, that was hilarious. We're not going to Greed Island, said Killua stubbornly. Miwa sighed dejectedly, her shoulders drooping. Thinking back on it now. I mean, I never got to go with you guys. Killua stared at her, then sighed. Fine. Let's go do the stupid Greed Island bullshit again. Gon let out a whoop. Yay! Speedrun. I'ma do the achievements this time around. Aren't we a little ahead though? Didn't we do something else? Ah yeah, that arena and auction thing, remembered Killua. Gon let out a hum. Well, let's go build Miwa's empire now, and then when we're done with that it should be time to do Greed Island. Miwa clapped excitedly. Thanks, boys. Krallo strikes me as the type of person to poke fun at someone in a way they don't realize they're being made fun of. There is so very little information on Meteor City at the time of posting I've had to take my own liberty with it. Sorry if this gets AU'd one day. Taken from the data book. Meteor City is around 2,311.11 square miles, 5,985.74 square kilometers. To help visualize, most cities range from 234 square miles, 606.05 square kilometers, to 847 square miles, 2,193.72 square kilometers. Tokyo is 847 square miles, 2,193.72 square kilometers. Japan is 145,914 square miles, 377,915.53 square kilometers. Meteor City has a population of 8 to 10 million people. Tokyo has a population of a little over 9 million. So, Meteor City is almost 3 times the size of Tokyo, but around the same population. And for the bonus fact of the day, Earth's trash island is around 1.6 million square kilometers, or around 3 times the size of France. Chapter 24, Hyena 2. Miwa gripped at the phone. This is Miwa. I am aware. So, I'm at Meteor City, began Miwa, oddly flustered from hearing Kikyo. With her free hand she reflexively reached out to grab Gon or Killua, but when she found neither were there she felt a rush of sheepish embarrassment which only flustered her further. It didn't help that Krallo cocked his head in confusion when she reached out to him. She abruptly snapped her hand back, her cheeks flaming. Kikyo's silence didn't ease Miwa at all. I'm just, kind of, destroying it? You're destroying Meteor City? Are rebuilding it, she hurried to explain. But I don't know how to build a city. Killua said you know a lot of stuff. I was hoping maybe you'd know someone who. Killua said that, there a note of joy in her voice. He said that I knew a lot? Yes, affirmed Miwa. Kikyo's voice warmed considerably. Yes, of course. He's right, I do. You're laying siege to Meteor City then? Did you know I grew up there? Alarmed, Miwa gasped. You did? She didn't want to imagine Killua's family living in the disgusting hellish pit of Meteor City. Even Miwa was surprised by the depravity of some of the citizens. Cannibals, slavers, deranged scientists, and everything in between. Gosh, I really hope Killua's mom isn't a cannibal. The woman didn't strike Miwa as a cannibal, but earlier that day one of Miwa's clones literally saw a mother eat her stillborn, so. Yes, repeated Kikyo softly. Then I met Silva, and he rescued me. I'm glad you're destroying it. Miwa gripped at her phone, closing her eyes. From Kikyo's soft tone she could hear sincerity. It was hard for Miwa to connect to other humans right away. No one mattered to her until they suddenly did. She was repulsed by the things witnessed in Meteor City, but none of it upset her. She held disdain because it smelled bad and looked gross, not because it was morally wrong or unethical. Maybe once upon a time that would have been the case, but time, too much of it, worn that voice down. There was a touch of exhaustion in her heart that resurfaced every time Miwa pondered the ambiguous concept of morality. Society decided what was right and what was wrong, but when society was devouring the weak and hosting tea parties with skulls as teacups, was that society to be trusted? How did anyone trust society to determine what was good and what was evil? Miwa understood the concept of it, but she lost the attachment to it. In doing so, she continued to distance herself from terms of empathy and sympathy. No one mattered to her until they suddenly did. And somehow the idea of a young little Kikyo laying witness to the things Miwa had already seen. She felt a tug inside her heart, the stirring echoes of warmth and kindness. Things that Miwa used to have, but somehow lost along the way. I'll destroy all of it, quietly promised Miwa. I'll burn away the bad. Will you really? I promise. She thought she could see Kikyo smiling at the other end of the phone. Kindness. Once upon a time Miwa thought she used to be a good person. She had vague memories of a time in her life when she tried to reach out a hand to those in need. She thought, maybe, she was even called a hero for a short time. She wondered what happened to change that. Don't dwell on it, advised Kurama. Let the past go. Was I a good person? Good is subjective. Miwa silently fiddled with her hair, uncertain what to say in response. Kurama, sensing her unease, softened. You were someone who shined despite the circumstances. You were kind in your own way, and you are still kind when it comes to your friends. I will never think of you as a bad person, Kit. Thank you, Kurama. Don't mention it. It's better than feeling you mope, or, sage forbid, brood over something so utterly stupid. I love you so very much. Kurama did not respond with words, but he didn't need to. Miwa could feel his chakra. There was a gentle warmth to it beneath the dangerous fire, and it was something he saved just for her. He was her family. I hope we can always be together, she thought. We will. You think so? Of course. You can't get rid of me that easily. Miwa smiled to herself. Kikyo had asked Miwa to call her every night for progress update. In exchange, Kikyo would advise Miwa on how to rebuild once she was done destroying. Not only was it helpful, but Miwa found herself looking forward to the conversations. Certainly, more fun than watching her clones clean up. There were a few days she had to halt cleaning progress because certain groups would try to stop her. The cannibals were annoying to deal with, but the Suicune bombers were the most aggravating. A few got close enough to Miwa to actually knock her off her feet and leave her ears ringing. She decided to put up multi-layered genjutsus going forth. Even if she could tank a few explosions, it only took one awkward landing to snap her neck. Of course, since she kept meeting a good chunk of resistance from some of the residents, that did result in her needing to murder them. Krallo suggested putting their heads on a pike as a warning to the others, so she did exactly that. Once she made enough head pikes, people stopped trying to get in her way. Which was nice. She wasn't comfortable eating or sleeping anywhere near that gross city, so she had been teleporting the two of them to another city. Killua had given her a card and told her to put all expenses on it. She had seen him check them in at a hotel, so she did that with Krallo at a pretty hotel that smelled nice and looked like it would have good food. 5 stars meant good food, right? She and Krallo got adjoining rooms and had dinner together. Although most of those dinners consisted of Krallo reading while he ate and Miwa trying to get through a child's book to practice the language. On one night she got frustrated enough trying to figure out one of the words that she decided she'd rather try to carry a conversation for once. "Why did you become a thief?" she asked Krallo. Their hotel room overlooked the city below. It was up on the 70th floor, and the two had shoved their table up to the window to eat. Krallo was enjoying some kind of multicolored thing that had a lot of vegetables and diced meat. Miwa kept ordering variations of sandwiches because that was the only word she recognized on the menu. Krallo paused in his bite of food. He stared thoughtfully outside. "Why? What was it again?" Miwa nibbled a bit more on her sandwich as she waited for him to gather his thoughts. "I don't remember," he murmured. "I've always been a thief." "Why did you become a thief?" "It's fun." "Fun," he repeated. "Yes. There is that." Miwa smiled, relieved she had been able to strike up a conversation. Wanting to continue, she asked, "Do you have a favorite heist?" Krallo carefully set down his fork. "Actually, yes. There was a long haul a few years back in the Bejaros Union. The V5 wanted to pressure them to join, and we were hired to steal some valuable information. Of course we took that along with a fair few item." Miwa tilted her head. "V5? V6 now, as the Bejaros Union was forced to join. The V6 is an alliance of some major countries in the world. The Bejaros Union, United States of Suherda, Federation of Akama, Mimbo Republic, and Kukanyu Kingdom." "Wow. You stole from a major country?" Miwa whistled. "What was it like?" "It was a lengthy operation, 6 months, perhaps?" Krallo mused, a brief smile over his face. "It'd make for a terribly long story. Are you sure you want to hear it now?" "Yes, please." Krallo inclined his head. "Very well. Gon and Killua." "Killua. Sorry to keep you waiting," apologized Killua. The two friends had finally entered Greed Island. It had been something of an odd start to enter the game. Shortly after Miwa had left town with Krallo, the two friends had been approached by an extraordinarily wealthy man named Battera who wanted to buy their games. Gon and Killua had no intentions of selling it, nor did they figure out how the man knew about their copies since the Phantom Troop had originally stolen it to give to Miwa, but they were able to learn more about the game before entering it because of him. Honestly, had they known it would have been a physically active game, they would have tried to keep Miwa with them. The boys were sheepish when they learned about being physically transported into the game. That changed their direction entirely. They had originally planned on going back to Gon's home to play the game, but if something happened to the console, like a power outage, they weren't sure they could return. One thing led to another, and Gon and Killua decided to use Battera's consoles to enter the game. Battera was sponsoring expeditions into the game, and whoever beat the game would be handsomely rewarded. After some debilitating, the boys agreed to go into the game using Battera's consoles, although not before an extra week of training, as Battera's head bodyguard advised them to. Battera would keep the copies of the game, in exchange for protecting their console. And so now the two boys had entered the game world. The starting area was a field of vast plains. New players stepped out of a raised stone house. Gon had been sitting underneath the house waiting for Killua since Gon loaded in first. Gon watched many of the people part of Battera's expedition head off in only 2 directions, which he thought was odd. Killua glanced around the plains. "I don't see any nearby towns." Gon said, "Yeah, but everyone headed in the same directions." Killua pointed in 2 directions. "They either went this way or that way?" "Huh? How did you know?" "'Cause that's where we're being watched from," explained Killua. "But we still don't know why they're watching us." "True." Killua shrugged as he started walking. "Well, let's go. Regardless of who's watching, we should start by gathering information." "So how did it go?" Your save data," Killua pointed out. "Book." A blue tome popped into existence in front of Killua. "How many cards were inside?" asked Killua. He had figured the saved file Jing, Gon's father, had left behind would be filled with cards to use. That was how the game was meant to be beaten, collecting 100 cards. If not already or near completed, then surely Jing had left his son a rare or useful card to use. There weren't any cards inside, said Gon. Ha? For real? Killua scowled. What a useless old man. Unbothered, Gon said, but there was a message from Jing. What did he say? To enjoy the game. Gon grinned brightly. Enjoy the game? This place doesn't really feel like a game, observed Killua. Book. Gon couldn't disagree with that. Killua and Gon had been transported into the game, but could such a vibrant world be described as a game? To Gon, it felt like they had simply teleported to another country rather than being implemented into a virtual reality. Gon asked, "What do you think about the rules?" Upon loading into the world, each player was stopped by an NPC who explained the world to them. In Greed Island, there were 2 magic spells available to anyone wearing a ring: Book and Gain. Book summoned a magical tome that was used to store cards collected. To clear the game, the player had to collect 100 unique cards. Specifically, they had to transform an item into a card to then place into the book. Such as if they obtained a legendary sword, it would automatically transform into a card to go into the book. However, if they wanted to use the sword, they could use Gain to turn it back into a sword. Each item had a card transformation limit, so a player should be wary to use it often. Once a card hit its limit, there was no way to turn it back to a card to collect it. Pretty vague tutorial, murmured Killua. We'll learn more as we go. They had a brief run-in with another player who cast Trace on Killua before the duo reached a town. The game clearly leaned into medieval fantasy with its design. The town could have fit in with any standard fantasy RPG. Killua and Gon wandered the cobblestone streets for several minutes until they came upon a huge crowd that had gathered in front of a board. Gon nudged Killua, nodding toward the board. Killua narrowed his pale blue eyes. He read, Antokiba monthly tournaments schedule. There's a rock-paper-scissors tournament this month, Gon pointed out. The prize is a Sword of Truth, said Killua. Is that an important item? Probably. Look at the other players around us, they're reading the board too, said Killua. Gon cocked his head. Should we participate? Course. Gon brightened. Then let's try to win a bunch of stuff. We should also gather information, said Killua, but suddenly both of their stomachs growled loudly. Aha, giggled Gon. Guess we should go eat. Yeah, let's look for a place to eat, agreed Killua. Gon blinked once, then an idea came to him along with a mischievous smile. Eat? Killua sucker punched him in the gut. Do not. Gon wheezed, clutching at his stomach. Miwa would have laughed. Miwa. Another 3 days of work ticked by. Meteor City was a barren wasteland with mountains of trash. Another week or so and the trash would be gone, but the destroyed land would remain. Krallo and Miwa sat together under a parasol as they watched the clones work. The decapitated heads on pikes didn't smell very nice, so Miwa put her breathing mask back on. The blonde Jinchuriki decided she'd burn the pikes once she was done cleaning out the garbage. In the distance, more so on the right, the citizens whose homes were destroyed camped out. Miwa hadn't thrown out anything that could be used as a temporary shelter, putting it off to the side for the citizens, the ones that didn't try to eat her or get in her way, to stay in while she worked. A good chunk of Meteor City diet was rats and similar cretins, excluding the cannibalism, so all found creatures were killed and given to the citizens. She wasn't sure how they were able to get a hold of water previously. There were no natural wells or springs, and whatever water pooled from rainfall was contaminated, and no one cared to explain it to her. Miwa opted to fill up cleanish barrels with Suetun. Shinobi and Kunoichi didn't drink from Suetun conjured water because it was laced with chakra. Those who had a chakra network could find their network becoming strained when ingesting too much of someone else's chakra. A Sutan user could drink their own Suetun water, but unless it was an emergency it was best not to. Miwa had yet to find a single person in the world with a chakra network similar to her own. She didn't foresee an issue, but really there was only one way to find out. Better to test it out on strangers than Gon and Killua. Kurama was a little interested in the reactions, too. He was hoping for a mutation. Miwa thought it'd be pretty neat if ingesting chakra would force them to grow their own chakra networks. Only time would tell. Tada, proudly exclaimed Miwa as she held up her notebook. Since she had finished reading through the elementary school books Gon bought her, it was time to practice writing. Krallo had been sketching beside her. Under the parasol, the two were protected from the harsh sun, the shade providing cool comfort. They sat on a large futon and blanket, big enough for them to lay down if they chose to. He leaned over her shoulder to peer at her writing. Softly, he said, "Grammar could use work, but it's a clear improvement." "Well done." "Ihihei," giggled Miwa proudly. She placed her notebook down and peered up at the blue sky. "Ah. I'm starting to get really bored." "Starting to? Okay, I was bored the first hour it started, but now I'm really bored," she complained, flopping onto the futon with a sigh. "I wish there was something more active I could do." Krallo tilted his head. "You could work on your nen to test the limitation of your teleportation." Miwa scratched her cheek. She mumbled, I haven't really done much nen training. The abilities you see me use aren't nen abilities. I know I'm a specialist, but that's about it." Krallo immediately turned to face her, surprise flickering over his normally stoic face for a split second before smoothing over. "Really?" "Yeah," said Miwa, taking a deep breath before explaining chakra. She had to elaborate further on how she and Wing discovered that nen was similar to chakra, and that Gon and Killua were able to use chakra, which likely meant anyone could learn it. Krallo listened patiently, attentive, asking questions throughout her explanation. There was a comfortable silence afterward as Krallo processed everything she had told him. "I'm a specialist myself," said after another minute of silence Krallo. He placed a hand over his chest. "Would you care to trade in knowledge? I can help you learn nen if you can teach me how to use chakra." Miwa tilted her head, thinking back to her odd nen reaction. The test for nen specialty was similar to the test for chakra nature. She had tried infusing her nen in water, and instead of a typical reaction, the water transformed into a type of oozing old blood. She explained such to Krallo. "Old blood, huh?" murmured Krallo. "MN. Yeah," she said, looking out over the garbage. "I wonder what my ability could be." "Anything, really." "Is there something you have in mind?" "Nope. I mean, I guess I'd like it to be cute if possible." "Cute," repeated Krallo. "Yes. How could I forget? If you can teach me a cute nen ability, then I'll teach you about chakra," she said, holding out her hand. Krallo accepted it. "We have a deal, then." Gon and Killua. Gon and Killua had obtained their first card, a junk item, and were in a good mood. With full bellies, bright smiles, and a plan to gather information, the two boys were about to set out again, but an explosion caught them off guard. Curious, they headed in the direction it came from. Surprisingly, a crowd of people had gathered around a man who laid flat on his stomach. A pool of blood oozed from him and bits of his intestines were splattered around. At a glance, Killua could see the man had experienced significant trauma to his abdomen, which had instantly killed him. There weren't many who could still operate with such a massive loss of organs and blood. Miwa might, thought Killua. She was a special kind of monster. He wouldn't be surprised if she told him about some super secret chakra ability that would let her survive fatal blows. Gon stared hard at the corpse, squinting as he struggled to remember where he had seen the dead man previously. "Ah! He's from that old man's expedition," remembered Gon. "Wow, he's seen better days." Killua glanced at one of the men around. "Hey, what happened?" His body suddenly exploded from the inside. "Yua, how scary," thought Killua uncaringly. "Wait. Killua, that spell that was cast on you earlier," Gon fretted. "I don't know," admitted Killua, a sliver of worry wiggling in his head. "Don't worry," said a man behind the boys. The body had disappeared from the game and the crowd began to disperse. "There's no such spell in this game. He died from another player's nun." Killua frowned, placing his hands in his pockets as he turned around to face the new man. "Does that mean the players are trying to kill each other?" "Why?" Gon asked. "Player hunting?" Killua furrowed his brow. He distinctly remembered that the rule stated when a player died, their book and cards disappeared. There shouldn't be merit to killing other players. The man said, "I can explain later. Anyway, are you interested in teaming up? We know of a sure way to clear the game." "Ugh," thought Gon and Killua, albeit for different reasons. Killua was suspicious of the man. He was shabby, worn, and grizzled. Killua didn't see how he could be of much use to them, and he didn't see why the man would want to team up with children. Gon was apprehensive because the man had an unpleasant odor. His nose wasn't as sensitive as Miwa's, but he had a decent enough sniffer that he didn't want to be around people that smelled bad. It took a lot for Gon to consider someone stinky. He didn't bat an eye at Heaven's arena despite how sweaty it was, which meant the man either had horrible taste in soap or hadn't bathed in months. Either way, no thanks. But the man said he knew how to clear the game. That could have been valuable information. If you want to hear me, just follow me. My allies are up ahead, said the man. Gon leaned Ino to whisper to Killua, what should we do? Sounds shady, muttered Killua. Someone used an attack spell on you earlier, right? Killua's face twisted in disgust. Been watching us? Everyone keeps an eye on the starting zone, dismissed the man. If you come, I'll explain why. I can also tell you about the spell that was cast on you. You're being awfully nice, what's the catch? It's about being nice. We have no choice. This game is difficult, unpleasant, and frightening. Once you realize that, you'll be more willing to accept our offer. Well, it's your first time playing, so you could use the information. What makes you think it's our first time? Shrewdly asked Killua, even as Gon started to glower at the man. On top of stinking, he's bad-mouthing the game, thought Gon, instantly disliking the man. It was a game his father had worked hard to create for people to enjoy, yet some stranger was complaining about it. But we should learn about the spell cast on Killua. The man frowned. Book. When neither of the boys reacted to the man summoning his book aside from shifting postures to defensive, the man smirked. That's why. You should always summon your own book when someone else summons theirs. Even if you don't have any cards, it's an important bluff as spells can only be blocked by other spells. Book. Alright, reluctantly said Gon. We'll hear what you have to say. The man led the boys over to a group of men. Or, well, mostly men. There was a small blonde girl in high pigtails. Do blondes like pigtails? Gon wondered when he spotted the girl. She kind of reminded him of Miwa. Except nowhere near as cool. Killua assessed each of them, his eyes lingering on the players that looked like a potential threat. In the past, he would have dismissed the pigtailed girl, but he knew from experience that pigtailed blondes could be rather deadly. He noticed how the girl was dressed in a pink frilly dress. That might be something Miwa likes, thought Killua. Miwa had a clear preference for cute things which she had defined as fluff and stuff that makes you go ah. He didn't really understand the definition, but he noticed the kinds of things she stole or bought for herself. The boys stood apart from the group as the men began to explain further. First, the murdered man had been killed by someone they called the bomber. They knew he was killed with Nen as there were no spells that could hurt other players. There were 40 spells in the game, and the one cast on Killua was an inspection spell. Next, while players could not loot the corpses of other players for cards, they could directly steal cards using spells. Once all the cards have been stolen, certain players will then kill the victim. Killing the victim would reset the card transformations on the stolen card. So, if a card had been used 10 times by a player, and someone else stole that card and killed that player, the card's 10 uses would be refunded. The group planned on monopolizing spells to steal cards in order to beat the game, but Gon didn't want to listen to it anymore. He knew the spell on Killua wasn't dangerous, and he was sick and tired of listening to the man bash the game. If you hate it so much, just leave. Gon thought angrily. There were ways to leave the game. Instead of enjoying the game Jing and his friends had worked so hard to create, the group was trash-talking it and focused on beating it. A game was a game. It was meant to be a fun adventure, not a dreadful job to complete. Worst of all, they were complaining that the rules were forcing them to kill. Who cared? It was a game. Play it or get out. I'm playing this game on my own, snapped Gon when the explanations were done. Welp, I'll pass too, said Killua, and the two boys left. Gon closer to storming off, and Killua with an amused whistle. He and Miwa have cute pouty faces, thought Killua. Both of his friends had a tendency of puffing out their cheeks when annoyed. Miwa. What the heck is that? Miwa demanded, pointing up at the sky. In the distance, she could see several giant airships, and even from so far away she could tell they were carrying garbage. Dumpsters. They'll unload on the city when they pass by, Krallo said. It happens every month or so. What? After I have spent so much effort cleaning it already. I have too many memories of cannibals trying to eat me because of this place. Miwa howled in fury, clenching her fists. Oh, no. I refuse. Never ever, you bastards. Might I suggest a Biju bomb? Yes. As soon as they were in range, Miwa spat out a giant Biju bomb that completely obliterated the airships. There wasn't even debris left to rain from the sky. Krallo slowly clapped. That was impressive. The surviving group of citizens in the tent over on the right started to clap, too. Thank you, Miwa muttered, still disgruntled from their audacity. Fucking bastards. Ah. Your eyes look a little red. Oops, said Miwa, rubbing at them until Kurama's chakra settled down. Gon and Killua and Bisky. Gon and Killua's first day in Greed Island had been turbulent. First, Killua got a trace put on him, then they ran into a group of bellyachers who hated the game but kept playing it anyway. Then when they won their first good card, it was immediately stolen by a group of thieves because Gon and Killua hadn't found any defensive spells yet. Determined to not let that happen again, the boys decided to head out to the magical city, Macedora. They were told it'd be a perilous journey filled with monsters and bandits, so the boys were super stoked about that. We'll have competition for who kills the most, chirped Gon as they prepared to leave the first town. Bonus points for how messy the kill is, agreed Killua, which elicited a big grin from Gon. Yay! Off we go! Gon cheered. Please wait, cried out a girlish voice. The boys paused, turning around to find a blonde girl with ringlet pigtails and a cute frilly dress running to them. She had a dainty run. I beg you, she said when she reached them, her pink eyes glistening with unshed tears. Killua warily eyed her. What? Please let me join you, she said. Oh, sorry. Can't, said Killua, waving his hand as if to shoo her off. Why not? You'd be a nuisance, dismissed Killua. He and Gon turned away, and so they missed the look of instant rage on the girl's face. You petulant brat. You call me a nuisance? Bisky, the girl, who was actually not a girl, but a woman who used her nin to hide her true form. Why? Because Bisky liked cute things, and it made her ever so happy when she looked like a cute girl, was absolutely infuriated. If I chose to, I could mop the floor with you with one hand tied behind my back. Kids these days. That does it. I was only going to tease these boys a bit, but now I'm going to ruin their lives. The boys had not given Bisky time to gather her thoughts, already marching on ahead. Hey! Hold it right there, you fool! Bisky caught herself, then raised her voice to a sweeter pitch. I mean, please, I'll try really hard not to get in your way. Gon and Killua ignored her, heading out of the town and breaking into an easy jog. They did not respond to her at all in their journey. Bisky got the hint early on, and instead of continuing to badger them, she followed behind them at a short distance. Both boys weren't surprised she could keep up with them. They had come to understand that girls with blonde pigtails were probably powerhouses or something. That was simply the way the world worked. The bandits were a disappointment. Neither Gon nor Killua wanted to kill them, as they literally fell to their knees and begged the boys for their help in the form of Gon and Killua giving them all of their money for expensive medicine. The boys handed over their money in hopes of the bandits giving them an item or something similar, but they weren't given anything in return. A touch irritated, the boys were eager to try their hand at monster hunting, which was fun. Each monster they faced had a specific weakness that the boys were delighted to figure out. Some of them were too difficult to face head-on, and others too fast to catch. Gon and Killua had a good laugh chasing around some black puffball monsters. Even if they couldn't catch or defeat all of the monsters encountered, it was still enjoyable. Bisky kept her distance the whole while, her irritation at the boys mounting ever higher. She about screamed in frustration watching the boys chase the black puffball monster. Watch the trajectory, not its current location. With observation, you can learn an opponent's pattern of motion. Your eyes are sharp, but you aren't using them properly. Bisky bemoaned. It was well into the night when the boys had given up chasing the puffball and continued their journey, Bisky running at a distance behind them. What a shame it got away from us, said Gon as he kept a steady jog. I bet Miwa would have liked to pet it. It looked fwa-fwa. Fwa-fwa, repeated Killua in amusement. Fwa-fwa, laughed Gon. Fluffy, right? That's what she used? Fwa-fwa, agreed Killua with a small giggle. We'll have to come back to the game with her later. She might actually like it. Amen. At least it won't take us long to reach Macedora if all the monsters are that weak, cheerfully said Killua. Don't be so stupid, inwardly groaned Bisky as she continued to run behind them. What if you encounter a monster that's both strong and fast? You silly children! After watching over the boys all day and into the night, Bisky could see what they could really become. They were already strong, fast, and had a good grasp of Nin, but they were too linear in their movements and didn't capitalize on their abilities. They certainly didn't stop to think up of strategies, simply brute-forcing their way through monsters. When that failed, they'd flee. These boys. They're just wasting their potential. They're raw stones that'll shine like diamonds with a little polishing. But at this rate, they'll run into stronger players or monsters and then it'll be game over. Bisky had already been annoyed at the boys before, but her frustration came to an abrupt eruption when they encountered a wandering suit of armor. Bisky could immediately tell the armor was being controlled by Nin and a puppet master was elsewhere, but when the boys decided to fight the armor instead of the puppet master, she lost it. That's it. I've had enough. Gyo, she shouted. Keep your eyes on the armor. Use Gyo. Don't you know how? Gon and Killua jumped in surprise at her shout. The boys knew she was there, but she had been quiet for several hours by that point, then quickly used Gyo. With it activated, the boys could see that the armor was controlled by Nin. Pleased they could use Gyo, Bisky went on, see that? That armor's just a puppet, so attacks won't work against it. Gon followed the line of Nin around a boulder while Killua distracted the suit of armor. The monster that had been controlling the armor was a tiny pink fluff ball that let out a squeak of alarm when Gon found it, then turned into a card. The armor fell apart because its puppet master transformed into a card. Gon brought the card over to Killua, holding it up in triumph. Bisky jumped down from the cliff she had been watching the boys from. She placed her hands on her hips as she scowled at the two of them. So, you can use Gyo. Why didn't you use it before? She sighed. So, you forgot. She held up her right index finger. When neither of the boys reacted, she continued, why are you just standing there? Gyo! The boys were taken aback for a moment. Gon and Killua used Gyo again, revealing that Bisky was manipulating her Nin to create the number 1 above her finger. What do you see? She asked them. The number 1, they said. She nodded once. Good. Listen up. If I use my finger, you use Gyo and then you holler out what you see. If you ever sense anything suspicious, use Gyo. Got it? Why are you ordering us around? Demanded Killua as he glowered at her. Bisky held up her finger again. Gon immediately used Gyo. Killua did not bother and said, the number 5. Bisky lowered her hand. Very good. She pointed to Killua. Drop and give me 200 push-ups. Ha! It's your punishment, she said. Get to it. What the hell? Why should I? Got a problem? No shit. Who do you think you are? Bisky perked up. Oh. I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm the pro hunter Biscuit Kruger. I first learned Nin 40 years ago. I'm going to use my wealth of knowledge and experience to coach you boys. You should be grateful. 40 years, gasped Gon. So, you're an old hag, declared Killua. Bisky immediately punched Killua in the face hard enough to send him soaring. Yeah, thought Gon as he watched his friend fly into the air. Cute girls in pigtails are scary. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.